in a position where they had to hear the case on the Monday and give their order on the Tuesday because the party candidates have to be published this week. In other words, we need to blame the election timetable for the position that they were in. We shouldn't blame them. What I understand is that we'll probably get a judgment next week. So in the meantime, we're in this kind of void where we're all discussing it and we don't know the reasons. And I don't like that situation, I must just say. I think it's a slightly dangerous. It's problematic. Let me use that phrase rather. It's problematic. We shouldn't really be in this position. But anyway, here we are. The Electoral Commission, they had a brief statement on this. And there was another judgment handed down by the Electoral Court yesterday around voting overseas, voting in other countries. And the IEC says, we note the orders were issued without reasoned judgment and in order to understand the basis of the conclusions reached in both matters, it's important that reasons are provided. We accordingly request the Electoral Court to hand down reasons for the orders made. Then they say this, and this is one of the cases is relating to the Zuma case. They say, naturally, the Commission is taking legal advice on both matters and will chart a way forward based on such advice, as well as reasoned judgments that it may receive, hopefully, in the not-too-distant future. And I almost wondered if the Electoral Commission was as surprised as I was at this ruling, listening to that. Anyway, that's where we are. As I say, very difficult to kind of understand the reasons for the ruling without the reasons being given. So let's wait until we get them, but I do expect a huge amount of conversation about this morning. We will hear from Umkhonto Wesizwe themselves. I imagine they must be very, very pleased at this decision. We'll ask them after 7 o'clock. Let them speak for themselves. We get some analysis for you on this as well. No suggestion yet that the Electoral Commission or anyone else, don't know if anyone else will lodge an appeal. But Deputy President Paul Mashatile reported in Business Day about him this morning. He made a comment yesterday about Zuma, saying it was strange that Zuma had still not left the ANC. He is still technically, as I talk to you now, as I understand it, a member, being suspended, but still a member of the ANC and campaigning, of course, from Umkhonto Wesizwe. He was talking at the University of Johannesburg yesterday. Mashatile also saying that they're confident they'll end load shedding by the end of the year. Now, I know you've been told this before, that load shedding will end, but we are on day 14 of no load shedding. So I think that's quite interesting, and we'll sort of talk a little bit more about that. And within all of that, Mashatile also talking about water yesterday and sort of saying, that he is now running this task team, and we spoke to his political advisor, Keith Khoza, earlier in the week about this issue, about the big water issue at the moment. Meanwhile, the Governor Mbeki municipality in Mpumalanga, they were fined yesterday 200 million rand for pumping raw sewage into a river system, into the Trichardspruit. There's another one called the Waterval High Reserve. There are other rivers in that area, and this happened in 2019 and 2020, but fined 200 million rand for doing that. And then, of course, also just on water issues, there's been a big fish die-off, so a large number of dead fish washing up in a river and in the sea in Durban near the sort of UPL warehouse. Remember that warehouse, the sort of a chemical warehouse that was set on fire during the violence in 2021. So a big story developing around that, I suspect. And then other important news just to touch on this morning is that the two people accused of being involved in the murder of AKA and Tibbs, Kenan Forbes and Tabela Motswane, who are in Eswatini, they say they will now oppose their extradition to South Africa. Siyabonga and Malusi Ndimande, their brothers, Ndimande I should say, excuse me, I wrote that wrong, Ndimande, their brothers, they're both now going to oppose their extradition. What that means is it could take quite a long time, got to go through the Eswatini legal process for our government to extradite them here to South Africa to stand trial along with the others for that, really, I suppose, assassination of AKA, wasn't it? If you look at what happened there. All right, lots to talk about this morning. As I say, I think the big issue is, once again, former President Jacob Zuma and the decision of the Electoral Court. You know the number, 086 000 2032, SMS 41391. You tweet SFM Radio and at Stephen Grootes and send your WhatsApp voice notes to 0614 104 107. How do you see it this morning? Good morning, 6:15.
And we would buy 500 cars, and we would buy 500 more. So sell your car for the best price, and we won't think about it twice. We buy cars, we buy cars. Da-da-dun-da-dun-da-dun-da-dun-da-da-da. We buy cars, we buy cars. Da-da-dun-da-dun-da-dun-da-da-da-da.
We Buy Cars Cars, the easiest way to sell your car by far.
South Africa is facing an increase in people diagnosed with non-communicable diseases such as diabetes, cancers, hypertension, lung problems and obesity. This also increases the number of people living with these diseases and mental health.
Many people living with these preventable diseases may not be immediately aware unless they go for health screening and testing.
It is our responsibility to invest in our healthier future through regular physical activity, healthy diets and avoiding risky health behaviors such as alcohol and tobacco use.
The Department of Health urges people to go for regular health screening for early detection and effective treatment if they are diagnosed with any of these conditions.
This message is brought to you by the National Department of Health.
2 years since winning the EFC middleweight title in the most dramatic and controversial fashion, Luke Michael finally defends his belt for the very first time at EFC 112 against the imposing submission machine, J.P. Kruger. And in the co-main event, featherweight champion Iga Smiley Cabeza becomes the next athlete aiming for champ status as he battles the imposing Kaleka Block Kabanda. EFC 112 live this Thursday. Watch it on SABC Sport Channel on DTT Channel 4 from 7 p.m. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
The Daily News Diary on SAFM.
And Musa, good morning. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Good morning, Stephen.
Yeah, well, as I said at the beginning of the show, I think that this decision by the Electoral Court energizes the elections in different ways, and I imagine there'll be a reaction this morning.
It definitely does. So true. Reaction from the MK party on the Electoral Court's decision. And also the IEC will be releasing the final list of parties and candidates that will be contesting the elections. Thus, we are expecting that the former President Jacob Zuma's name will appear on the Mkhonto Wesizwe party list, and it comes after the Electoral Court upheld the MK Mkhonto Wesizwe's appeal against the IEC's decision to uphold that objection against Zuma being on the party's candidate list.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a big issue this morning.
It will be.
And through the next couple of days. What else is coming up today?
The Powers and Privileges Committee is expected to receive an update on the complaint laid by the DA against the former National Assembly Speaker Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula and the DA Chief Whip Siviwe Kgakgobe wants the committee to investigate Mapisa-Nqakula following a salary increase of the Secretary to Parliament Xolile George. Also keeping a close watch on the aftermath of the floods in various provinces. We know that schools across the Western Cape province will reopen today after being closed due to the adverse weather. And then in Johannesburg, the city of Johannesburg is appealing as well to religious groups to stay away from flooded rivers amid reports of more rain that is expected. The community in Hammanskraal for years has been experiencing water supply and quality challenges, and at least 31 lives were claimed in the deadly cholera spread, as well as an investigation into the Rooival wastewater project. So this morning, we're looking at a joint visit by the Water and Sanitation Minister Senzo Mchunu and the City of Tshwane Mayor Cilliers Brink, who will be conducting an oversight project inspection of the Rooival wastewater treatment works and Klipdrift package plant in Hammanskraal. And the inspection come as the Department of Water and Sanitation, that is through its entity Magalies Water, and the City of Tshwane are trying to address this long-standing water challenges that are affecting most parts of Hammanskraal. And then lastly, the Gauteng provincial government will host a send-off ceremony for over 2,000 military veterans at the Grace Bible Church taking place in Pimville in Soweto. And the military veterans were recruited to join the Gauteng traffic wardens as part of the Nasi Spani recruitment program, which was launched in June.
Yeah, a lot going on, isn't there? Thank you very much indeed. And Musa will be listening on the radio 19 minutes after 6.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
Let's have a look at your weather around the country this morning. Tshwane, fine, becoming partly cloudy from the afternoon, 10 and 25. Johannesburg, fine, partly cloudy from the afternoon, 7 and 24. Vereeniging, fine, partly cloudy from the afternoon, 6 and 25. Bombela, fine, partly cloudy later, 16 and 25. Polokwane, fine, 14 and 25. Mahikeng, fine, becoming partly cloudy in the afternoon, 9 and 25. Vryburg, fine, partly cloudy later, 8 and 23. Mangaung, fine, becoming partly cloudy cloudy later, 8 and 21. Kimberley, fine, partly cloudy later, 8 and 21. Uppington, fine, 10 and 25. Cape Town, partly cloudy, a moderate to fresh southeasterly, 15 and 20. George, cloudy, a chance of light rain, a moderate southwesterly wind, 13 and 17. Gqeberha, cloudy, scattered light showers and rain, a fresh to strong southwesterly, 12 and 20. East London, cloudy, scattered light showers and rain, a fresh to strong southwesterly, 13 and 20. eThekwini, fine, partly cloudy, with isolated light showers and rain, a fresh to strong southerly wind, becoming gale force at times in eThekwini today, 17 and 26. Richards Bay, fine, becoming partly cloudy, isolated light showers and rain, a fresh to strong southwesterly, 17 and 26. And Pietermaritzburg, fine, becoming partly cloudy towards midday, 13 and 26.
Worldview Update, bringing you closer to international or global news.
20 minutes after 6, good morning. In Europe, the footballing body there, UEFA, has said all of the Champions League football tournament quarterfinals will go ahead despite a series of claims that a threat has been made that one or others of the games could be the site of a terrorist incident. It comes after attackers were able to kill at least 143 people in a concert hall in Moscow 3 weeks ago, and after a series of threats by the group ISIS against Western targets. Jasmine Opperman is a security analyst specializing in terrorism. Jasmine, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Good morning, Stephen, and morning to your listeners.
We've seen in places like Russia, in Europe, the UK, threats against this kind of mass event. How seriously should authorities take these?
They cannot underplay it. I think what we need to understand, Stephen, is what the Russia attack has done is to remind the world of what we have known for so many years, of the Islamic State and now Al-Qaeda these days, relying on echo chambers of incitement, spreading propaganda, and then trying to incite certain groups of people to go operational on their own and execute these attacks. They cannot be ignored, and one would have expected anyway with Gaza and Israel that the highest level of security should be applied. Note that there was no official threat on any official account from the Islamic State for this attack that they are planning. They will not propagate that. But the echo chambers are running at a high pace.
So in other words, this is based on intelligence, what people call chatter. So to make that kind of assessment, it's very difficult to sort of manage all of this information.
It is extremely difficult, Stephen, and we must realize that for one or other reason, with what is happening in Israel and Gaza, there has been this expectation that there will be an increase in what is being referred to as lone wolf attacks. We've seen this in France, we've seen this in Belgium, we've seen this in Turkey, where people were trying to execute attacks. Not so much to support Hamas, but as a response to what's happening to the Palestinians in the name of the Islamic State. And hence the warning. Just a reminder that these, if one looks at tourist advisors being issued by the US, by the UK, is being done as a legal obligation to protect their own citizens. And hence, I would hope that they will apply high levels of security in trying to counter it, as impossible as it may sound.
Well, there's been a recent advisory on the British government's website about South Africa. And so, for example, the British government, their travel advice says, they say this: terrorists are very likely to try to carry out attacks in South Africa, and the main threat is from individuals who may have been inspired by terrorist groups, including Daesh, who may try to carry out lone actor attacks. That's the quote from the British sort of travel advisory to their people coming here. How do we as South Africa assess a claim made by a foreign government about something that could happen in our own territory?
Yeah, well, I've Stephen, to be quite honest with you, I've read these advices about planned attacks for the last 15 years. Extremism in South Africa must be evaluated at a very different level. The inclination to proceed with such an attack in an organized manner is not something that is familiar to South Africa. Yes, there's support for them. Stephen, let's not underplay the support that these groups have from South Africa. We have even seen in the heydays of the Islamic State, 2014, the Caliphate days, where people went to the Caliphate to live their dream. It turned out to be a hell, and most of them are not alive today. But the concern here is, yes, okay, we know who they are. But now to claim that there's an organized plan to execute an attack, I'm sorry, Stephen, I have not seen this. I don't say I have all the intel that there should be. The concern with lone wolves, we know who these extremists are in South Africa. We can list them. It's not a problem, Stephen. I can share the list with you. The concern is the middle group. That is showing sentiments but has not taken that decision. But I will put my head on the block here. A planned attack in South Africa now with a sudden U-turn on the face of extremism in South Africa, I am sorry, highly unlikely.
Sure. In the US, the real problem for mass events is the lone shooter. So it's an American citizen who has easy access to a gun who starts to shoot people. In Europe, it seems to be more of a threat from people who plan an operation. Could we see in some particularly Western countries that almost all mass events come under some kind of threat, maybe the end of the mass event?
Yes, and Europe is the number one area of concern at this point in time. Okay, now we're not discussing Africa this morning, but Africa has a different dimension because that we need to understand the tactics of Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, to understand what is happening in Africa. But for definitely sure, if I had to be in Europe with mass events, I will apply stringent security measures without compromise. Will you pick up the lone wolf? If you don't have the intelligence, which most likely they won't have, it will just be damn lucky. People that plan these attacks make sure that they fit into the crowd, make sure that they move into the crowd, that they're not easily identifiable, and usually they're not even being listed. There were incidents where actually some of them were listed, for instance, in the UK, and they still managed to execute these type of attacks. So it's this middle ground, Stephen, that is the problem for any intelligence service, because how can you cover all social media networks and private communication to pick up a sudden increase in an intent to execute an attack?
Jasmine Opperman, thank you. Security analyst specializing in terrorism. Do appreciate the time. 27 minutes now after 6.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning.
Good morning.
Oh dear, Banyana, the dream's over.
Bitter pill to swallow there, Stephen. Edged out by Nigeria and their prowess. Nigeria booking their place to the 2024 Paris Olympics. 1-0 was their win on aggregate. The game at Loftus last night ended goalless, but the Nigerians are going through thanks to that first leg 1-0 scoreline. Now, the South Africa's team last appeared at the Olympics was at Rio de Janeiro in 2016, while Nigeria's last Olympic Games appearance was in Beijing in 2008. Let's listen from now to Banyana captain Rafael Wajane.
Yes, I think we played a good game. We played according to the coach's instructions. It's just unfortunate that we couldn't get the goals that we needed today. It was a hard-fought game that we played. Everyone tried their level best. I think even our defenders today, the centre backs, the full backs, everyone in the midfield and up front, we tried. And I think it was just unfortunate that we couldn't get the goals inside.
Elsewhere, Manchester City drew 3-3 with Real Madrid at the Bernabeu. That leaves the Champions League quarter-final tie in the balance. The draw was a fair result given City dominated possession while Madrid had the better of the chances, all to play for ahead of the second leg, which will take place in Manchester. Now, Arsenal and Bayern Munich traded blows. They drew 2-2 at the Emirates, leaving their Champions League quarterfinal finally poised ahead of next week's second leg. Now, Bayern without any fans at the Emirates Stadium, and that was due to a UEFA ban for throwing fireworks on the pitch. They welcome Arsenal to the Allianz Arena for the second leg on Wednesday, and that will be next week. Swimming, two young guns down the veterans at the South African Championships in Gqeberha last night, both in the 100-meter freestyle. Amy Canny edging Erin Gallagher, and that was in the women's final, while Peter Coetzee saw off Chad Leclos in the men's race. Janae Coetzee won the women's 200-meter butterfly, and there's hope that there'll be Olympic qualification times achieved today in the women's 200-meter breaststroke, courtesy of Tatiana Schoenmaker, now known as Tatiana Smith, and Kaylin Corbett, and in the men's and women's 200-meter freestyle. And finally, some cricket news. Tasman Brits struck a century, but rain had the final say in the opening ODI between the Proteas women and Sri Lanka. It was washed out at Buffalo Park in East London. The Proteas, they posted a formidable 270 for 6, batting first, and just under 7 overs were then possible in Sri Lanka's chase, with them reaching 23 for the loss of no wickets when rain arrived to chase the players from the field. That's where we leave it for now. We'll have more sport on Sunrise, top of the hour. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. Good morning. You with SFM leading the conversation. More on the bodyguards for the Joburg Mayor in the next half an hour. It's day 14 with no load shedding, 6:30.
Good morning. In the headlines, Umkhonto weSizwe Party spokesperson Nhlomulo Ndlela says they welcome the decision by the Electoral Court to rule in favour of former President Jacob Zuma's bid to remain on the MK party list ahead of the elections. The Home Affairs Minister Arun Motsoaledi says the issuing process of critical skills visa has been amended but not changed, meaning individuals will no longer have to wait 4 years for the special visa. And US President Joe Biden has called on Israel to agree to a 6 to 8 week ceasefire in its war against Hamas in Gaza. I'll have details on these and other stories at 7.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Still an amazing backlog just through the Escort area towards Moy River. So just on the southern side of Escort, earlier truck crash closed the road, backed everything up. It has been reopened, but only one lane, and it's taking forever to filter all that truck and vehicular traffic through there. So major delay alerts if you're Escort on your way down to Durban. This is important today. The N3 blasting between Pietermaritzburg and Durban will move into the Peacevale area. There's a scheduled 30-minute closure of the N3 today between 2:30 and 3 p.m. Between the Key Ridge, Hillcrest M13 exit and Cliffdale. So just be aware of that, 2:30 to 3. Maybe a good idea just to be avoiding travel on that section. It will be closed and everything will backlog and just take a little while to clear through. Joburg looking pretty good. Just a reminder, there are the roadworks on the R21 approaching Clayville if you're coming from Pretoria. Dusport Tunnel trundles on you down to Vomhagen. That's a heavy delay, probably Gauteng's heaviest backlog at this stage by the looks of things. In Cape Town, just very slow coming out of Mitchell's Plain. AZ Berman to the R300, R300 to M7, and M7 slow this morning. Not so much to Samora Michelle, rather towards Highlands Drive, going north out of Mitchell's Plain, that side busy. Rob Byrne, SFM Traffic.
The business update on SAFM.
With our business show host, Jimmy Moyaha. Jimmy, good morning. How are you doing this morning?
Morning, Stephen. Well, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. Are the markets as well as you are?
Some of them are. If we start in the US overnight, Nasdaq was up about 0.33%. The S&P 500 up about 0.1%. The Dow kind of finishing flat. Yesterday, South African markets were up about 0.1% as well. In Asian trade, in this morning's trade, a lot of them are in the red, with Tokyo down about 0.33%, Hong Kong up almost 2%, and the Korean markets sitting flat at the moment. Indian markets up about 0.1%. Chinese markets down about 0.33%. And if we look at Philippines markets, those are sitting kind of flat at the moment. If we look at some commodities pricing, the gold price is still holding steady, up about 0.1%, sitting at $2,355 an ounce there. Silver prices up about 1%. Copper prices up about 0.1%. Platinum has not yet broken that $1,000 level, sitting at $991 an ounce. Palladium has broken 1,100, sitting at exactly $1,100 an ounce there. And Brent crude still hovering around that $90 a barrel level following those developments in the Middle East. So we'll keep an eye on that to see how the Brent crude price continues to behave. If we look at some of the currency movements, the Rand has been benefiting off of a weaker dollar of late, briefly coming below 18 Rand 50, currently sitting at around 18 Rand and 45 cents against the dollar, sitting at around 23.39 against the euro and 20 Rand and 2 cents against the British pound, almost a full percent stronger there. Crypto side of things, the price of Bitcoin sitting at $69,103, didn't hold above that $70,000 level for too long, and Ethereum around $3,519 there.
And then an internal memo in one company sent its share price up 5%. Which company?
Believe it or not, Alibaba. I suppose given the person who sent the internal memo, it does make a bit of sense. It was sent by the founder of the company, Jack Ma, and basically the memo was lauding some of the efforts that had been put in place by the company's current chair, Joseph Tsai, as well as the current CEO, Eddie Wu, and it was just an endorsement from the founder around the measures that the company has been putting in place, the activity of the business. It also outlined what they anticipate will happen over the next 6 months. The markets seem to receive that very, very well. So Jack Ma put up a screenshot of this memo on his social pages, and that's kind of contributed towards Alibaba's share price rallying around 5%, and is the reason the Hong Kong markets are so strong today, because of the size and the positioning of Alibaba within the Hong Kong market. There is still a lot of concern sitting around Alibaba where it relates to China and the regulatory interventions that China has been putting in place over the last 3 years against tech companies like Alibaba. And that you're seeing in the memo as well. You're seeing that with a couple of the divisions are still set to be struggling there. But we'll keep an eye on that. We'll see how that unfolds for Alibaba and their share price. But it's always nice to see a founder endorsing the current leadership, and the market seemed to like that as well.
Jimmy Moyaha, host of our business show. Thank you. You'll hear him this evening. You'll hear him again in an hour's time, 24 minutes to 7.
Africa Update on SAFM Sunrise, a continental overview of current African affairs.
The Rust Advocate, Sipho Mantula, good morning.
Refreshing morning and Jumbo Africa to the listeners.
In Togo, the government has delayed these polls and consultations. Why?
Stephen, remember there was a constitutional referendum or constitutional reform that was done by the members of parliament, and they are having legislative and regional elections that was scheduled for the 20th of this month. Now there's a delay because the members of parliament now have to conduct what they call a 3-day tour to listen to and inform civilians on the constitutional reform. Very important. Despite that, we might be seeing the same challenges that we see of the current president, Kansibe, whose others are saying he's trying to extend his grip on power, and as well as looking away on what came out last month when I said that the parliament granted the power for the parliament now to choose the president, doing away with direct elections. And that's what has concerned many oppositions in Lome, in Togo. And hence we are seeing this delay because they have to do what they call public hearings and consultation in the area of Togo and as well as neighboring provinces.
And then in Liberia, they backed the establishment, the Senate, of a war crimes court. What would happen here?
This came from Joseph Boakai proposing that resolution, before the parliament last month. And yesterday it was out of 29 senators, 27 backing it. It's based on the 1989 and 2003 crimes that were committed during the civil war in Liberia. There were many people who died. 250,000 people were killed in those conflicts, even from massacres to rape and the use of child soldiers. And hence we had what we call transitional justice system that was used in that country. Now they went through the UN, but they have opted to have their own war crimes court. And I think this is a great precedent for the West Africa region, but also for the continent, not to only rely on ICC or as well as ICJ.
And then the Rwandan president, Paul Kagame, he is in the UK. He met with the British Prime Minister.
Once you are in 10 Downing Street, Stephen, there must be something that they are talking, just coming out of the 30 years of the Rwanda genocide. Paul Kagame dealing with the first flights that will go to Rwanda in spring. And in that meeting of mine yesterday, there were issues around legislation that should be passed in Britain to pave the way to send those asylum seekers who has to arrive in Rwanda. They are expected to debate this in the next coming 5 days, where the legislation has to allow the Prime Minister Sunuk to can now agree on this asylum seeker deal with Paul Kagame from Rwanda. Interesting moments that we see from Paul Kagame. As I said, once you are in 10 down street, something is cooking.
And then in Djibouti, they've joined the race to be chair, to have their delegate as chair of the AU.
That is interesting that we have Somalia from the Horn of Africa, you have from East Africa, Nairobi, Kenya, under Raila Odinga going for that. And Somalia, Yusuf Adam, their former foreign affairs minister. Interestingly, also Djibouti is also nominating their foreign affairs minister, Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, who they have said that he has experience in diplomacy. He has been there in the diplomatic issues of AU, so they feel that he can be one of the candidates. Remember, Kenya has the support of Uganda, Rwanda, Ethiopia, and Tanzania. President Ruto also supporting that Kenya bid for the AU chairperson come 2025. So these are interesting moments in the AU level when you look at the role of Musa Faki now coming to an end, but seeing East Africa as well as the Horn of Africa contesting for that CEO position at the AU Commission in Addis Ababa.
And then in our archives, this day, 10th of April 1993. Gosh, what a day it was.
Very important, Stephen, for that when we look at our history, that it was just on the eve of the elections, almost a year before the elections, in 1993, in the East End, in an area called Don Park, that was a very interesting moment that the Jaluswa Luz, who killed Krisani, nearly changed that moment of Kempton Park talks about the resolution of going for the elections, and the murder and the assassination of Tembisile Krisani Stephen sent the shockwaves in the country as well as in the continent. And we know that funeral, how it was well attended in FNB Stadium, how it raised emotions around what happened in 1993. We know every year, Stephen, there's always a commemoration of Krisani by his family as well as the SACP. Asante Sana SGS was still in the conversation, SAFM observing the Freedom Month.
Ras Advocate Sipho Mantula, thank you very much indeed. Back tomorrow, more news from our continent through the day, 19 minutes to 7.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
All right, your reaction. The big news yesterday, of course, the Electoral Court saying former President Jacob Zuma is qualified, is eligible to stand as a candidate for election to the National Assembly from Controwest Sizwe. Stembile on the line from eThekwini, Durban. Hi, good morning.
Good morning, Steve. How are you?
Yeah, I'm well. Go for it.
I'm glad that you are surprised, because I listened to your comment yesterday morning when I was going to work around this case. It was like, actually, there's this perception that the judgment was going to be obvious, that it is going to disqualify and concur with the IEC, but it was not the case. But I also want to take on the analyst by Teleselani. Teleselani, I think I've seen. I think you even called him on your story yesterday on Channel 4 5. I just saw the interview together with William Bogo. I watched you, and then he said, Section 47, it could not be applicable and only elevate one part of it. You should look at it holistically. And then that by that it means also, he also said, then the IEC was supposed to scrutinize and screen all these 15,000 candidates that was actually submitted to be eligible for National Assembly. And again, it was not an IEC matter, it was a matter raised by someone who objected to the name of Jacob Zuma. And I think it is only fair that, for now, as much as there's this controversy in relation to the sentencing of Zuma, whether it warrants him to be disqualified or it doesn't, I think that's a different discussion. I may not measure because I'm not a law expert, but I'm picking from the general point that if you elevate Section 47, it's not you cannot only elevate one part of it, but you have to look at it holistically.
Yeah.
That was my comment. Thank you.
No, thanks, Tembile. Look, let's see what the judgment says when the final reasons are given. KG and Swane, how do you feel about it?
Stephen, well, all this is democracy at play, but allow me to be a bit controversial to the 2 points. Certain years ago, an idea by a certain group of people was proposed that I was vehemently against, but now I'm inclined to actually agree with them. One was that taxpayers in this country need to have a special vote on top of the current vote that they have.
Sorry, say that again. That taxpayers should have a special vote.
Should have a special vote.
Yeah.
And then the most controversial one was for a person to vote, they need to have a certain level of intelligence. Well, I'm not saying I have that intelligence. I might not have that intelligence.
Do you prefer, can we use the phrase education rather than intelligence?
Well, that's fine, Stephen. You can use education. No, not education. No, not education. There's a reason why I'm saying intelligence as well. It's only fair, Stephen, that, I'm inclined to agree with them with the going on as to what's happening in our country as well. I think those two ideas need to be explored. I don't know how you feel about it.
You know, there used to be a thing called a qualified franchise, and that meant it wasn't just here; it was in other places. You had to own property, or you had to have education, or something like that. And I think most places have decided that actually a qualified franchise. I mean, if you only allowed taxpayers, for example, to vote, that would mean only richer people would vote. I think that would be a huge problem.
On top of the current vote that they have, well, let's have two votes in this case.
Oh, I see what you mean.
I mean.
Well, in Britain at one point, if you were a man and you owned property and you worked, you had 4 votes and a woman had 1. I don't think that's fair either. No, Zelma is shaking her head very strongly.
Yeah. No, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. All right, KG and Swane, thank you. The idea of a qualified franchise, haven't heard that for a while. 6:45.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
Well, there's been more reporting in the last few days about the new policy in the city of Joburg that explains in detail the protection arrangements for the mayor and the speaker and other councillors. The Daily Maverick reported this week that the mayor, Kabelo Gwamanda, will now have 10 bodyguards. 5 cars have been assigned to him. The speaker, Margaret Arnolds, will have 8 cars and gets 5 cars as well. The city has had a policy of providing protection to councillors in certain positions for many years, so that's nothing new. What is new, as I understand it, is that the council voted 2 weeks ago to make it easier for councillors to get bodyguards. And I must remind you about the Rand Water executive, Tebogo Jwala, who was shot dead in an assassination last year. Mlima Ndlela Ndamase is the head of communications for the city of Joburg. Mlima Ndlela, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Good morning, Stephen, and good morning to your listeners.
Why does the mayor need 10 guards and 5 cars?
I think let's just backtrack, Stephen, so that we've got the facts laid out properly. Previously, the regime in Johannesburg, more especially up until 2016, it is only the mayor and the speaker who received any sort of protection. And that, you would remember, was during the reign of Parks Tau. With the election of former Mayor Mashaba in 2016, we saw an extension of that, not only from the mayor, but right through across all MMCs, including the speaker, the chief whip, and chair of chairs in council. Now, that has been a practice since 2016, which has been an anomaly in the city. And the policy that was presented to council 2 weeks ago was a policy that sought to regularize that particular anomaly. And in regularizing it, it is not introducing anything new, but it is precisely stating what has been the practice since 2016 in the city and what the current administration has found to be irregular, and which it seeks to rectify by ensuring that anybody who is provided with protection utilizing resources of the city, it must be done so on the basis of a valid threat assessment that has been done by the South African Police Services, and not a total widespread blanket approach to providing protection to all those who are in the executive leadership positions of the city.
Okay, so there's been a threat assessment for the mayor.
Again, Stephen, I just want to clarify. This is a practice that has been in place since 2016.
I understand
yes,
that.
Let me help you, Stephen. So what is being done is to create a policy that requires that a threat assessment must be done, and that request has been put through to SAPS so that it can justify whether or not the mayor requires the protection that is provided currently.
Okay, so there hasn't been a threat assessment on the mayor yet?
No.
Okay, but he still has the 10 guards and 5 cars?
And well, let's talk about that as well. The mayor only has a set of 4 bodyguards, and they work on a shift system. Those protection officers work like all JMPD officers in the city, 4 days off and 4 days on. Now, it means that when others are on 4 days off, there needs to be a team that is on duty.
Okay.
So the mayor is protected by a group of 4 protectors who are on duty, and when those are off shift, and then others are on duty. But again, I want to emphasize the point. This is something that Mayor Kwamanda inherited as part of a process or that was initiated and introduced in the city under Mayor Mashaba. And this is what we are now trying to rectify.
Okay, I understand that. Why 5 cars? I mean, you can only travel in 1 car at a time. So why are there 5?
Well, that report is also quite incorrect, Stephen. I mean, some of the vehicles that they speak of, you must remember that some of these vehicles in the city have been in the asset register of the city for a long time. Now, if you have a vehicle that has been owned by the city and registered under the mayor's office since 2008, it means that it is still an asset of the city. It may not be used by the executive mayor personally, but it is an asset of the city that is still utilized within the office of the mayor for other responsibilities. The mayor does not travel in a convoy of 5 cars, nor does he travel in any convoy. So that report, again, is inaccurate in as far as the protection of the mayor is concerned.
Okay, so there's only 1 car for the mayor to travel in, and when he goes with bodyguards, he goes in that 1 car. There's no sort of chase car and escort car and things like that. It's 1 car.
Well, the mayor can only travel in 1 car. He's only 1 person.
Yes. What I'm trying to get to is that his guards travel with him in the same car. You don't have some guards in a car in front of him or a car behind him like a presidential convoy.
No, he does not have any presidential convoy that accompanies him anywhere.
Okay. I'm sorry to be so specific, Mli Mandlela, but let me just get to the point. When the mayor travels, there's only 1 car that is involved in that traveling. You don't have 2 cars traveling because one of them's carrying bodyguards. You have 1 car moving around with the mayor, and that's it.
The mayor travels in 1 car when he travels.
Okay, thank you. This must cost a little bit of money, and I appreciate what you say about the policy. I'm not against a mayor having protectors. Don't get me wrong. I'm just trying to understand the policy. How much money does this cost? And of course, the city of Joburg's had financial problems. Your revenue is down. You had to borrow money last year for operational expenses. So obviously money is an issue. I'm presuming the guards come from the Joburg Metropolitan Police Department, so I'm presuming they would have been paid anyway. Is that right? Is that how it works?
That's how it works, Stephen. But I think we must appreciate that what the policy seeks to do, it seeks to cut what is currently a blanket provision of protection services to the executive leadership of the city. Because if this introduction of protection was done according to policy, a threat assessment would have had to be done whether or not Stephen requires protection at all. Otherwise, Stephen could easily move around and drive themselves to work as and when they execute responsibilities of the city. The hope of the mayor and his current administration is that once the threat assessments have been done, there are people who will therefore not qualify for the protection that is currently provided, and that will then be able to assist us to reduce the current resources that are being spent on protection services and redirect those officers back into fighting crime within the city of Johannesburg.
Okay, Mli Mandlela, that makes a lot of sense. Let's see how it plays out. A general question, if I may, because you are head of communications for the city of Joburg. The city of Joburg right now, how would you describe it? How it's being run? I mean, are you proud of how the city is looking at the moment?
No, I don't think anyone would be proud. We aspire to be a world-class African city. I can, without doubt, tell you that we are not there as yet. But I can also say that there is a concerted effort of making sure that we recover from the disruption that has been caused by the past few administrations that existed in the city. And most importantly, is to make sure that we create administrative stability over and above political stability, because it is the administration which carries the core mandate of ensuring that every day when we wake up, we've got water in our taps, we've got electricity in our households, and that our traffic signals are functioning and that our roads are of good condition, that we can drive on without potholes and other hindrances.
You got to potholes before I did. Mli Mandlela, thank you very much indeed. Mli Mandlela Ndamase is the head of communications in the city of Johannesburg. 7 minutes to 7.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Morning, here's one to avoid. It's the M2 in towards Crown Interchange. Vehicle is overturned this morning. It's an enormous backlog of traffic coming in from sort of Joe Slovo Benrose territory, if you like, moving through the Crown dreadfully slowly. Won't want to come off at Denver, Cleveland. Certainly Benrose hit some alternative routes into central Joburg, if that's your destination, and avoid that run towards Crown. I've just put a video up on x.com at Traffic SA. You can have a look at why you should be staying away from the M2 M2 going westbound downtown today. The N3 queuing up through Galuli's interchange. That's off the northbound side. So you sit up to the roadworks that have been there forever at Funbira, and then it just gets busy on those left lanes as you get in and try and hook in towards the airport of Boksburg through the interchange area. N1 back to being busy this morning between Beyers Nordia and the Sunning Hill area. That run through Randburg, just under a lot of pressure. A lot of lights still down all over the Greater Four Ways area, including lights on William Mandela and Leslie. So it's all backed up through there again today. R55 at Crowthorne heading south is quite a busy run through, and the Dustport Tunnel very heavy. Looks like an issue bottom of the tunnel side on Transaranya at Vom Hagen. So coming through Bremer and the tunnel, it's very heavy. Long queues at Escort still on the N3 Durban bound, just on the Escort south side, the south side of Escort. That is an earlier truck crash. Cape Town still with the lights out on the R44 at Annandale Road on your way from Somerset West to Stellenbosch, very heavy. Normally get points from there. They might arrive things moving, but if you're on your way to Stellenbosch, that's a heavy queue. And the highways are pretty busy, including what appears to be an issue on top of Wynberg Hill this morning. So M3 heavier than normal coming in from the Constantia side. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The boys of Steve Barker resist to leave the pitch without a ticket to the semis. But there's a big problem. Kevin Hunt's boys say the last dance of happiness belongs to them. This is the Nedbank Cup quarterfinal battle. Stellies versus Matsatsansa Pitori on Saturday, 13 April at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC1 and SABC radio stations. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game. Real savings, real benefits. Here's what real clients say about OUTsurance.
My name is Alan. I'm 71 years of age and I live in Douglasdale. I'm paying 554 Rand a month for my 2022 Nissan Magnite.
Want a car insurance premium that'll blow your mind? SMS out to 30754 now for a quote. It's quick, it's easy, and it could save you hundreds of rands every month. Here's Amy.
To anyone who has not reached out to OUTsurance, what are you doing? Reach out today.
Blow your mind, not your paycheck. SMS out to 30754 and see for yourself why OUTsurance was voted Best Car Insurer 2023 by the Star and Pretoria newsreaders. Here's Yusuf.
It just shows that OUTsurance is top of the tops when it comes to insurers.
SMS out to 30754 now. That's out to 30754. OUTsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's, C's, and limits apply. Premiums are risk profile dependent and reviewed annually. Client comments do not constitute financial advice.
2 years since winning the EFC middleweight title in the most dramatic and controversial fashion, Luke Michael finally defends his belt for the very first time at EFC 112 against the imposing submission machine, J.P. Kruger. And in the co-main event, featherweight champion Iga Smiley Cabeza becomes the next athlete aiming for champ status as he battles the imposing Kaleka Block Kabanda. EFC 112 live this Thursday. Watch it on SABC Sport Channel on DTT Channel 4 from 7 p.m. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
SAFM 104 to 107. Nationwide.
3 minutes to 7. Good morning. In KwaZulu-Natal, a group of unemployed doctors has been trying to have a sit-in at the Natalia building, which houses the Provincial Health Department in Pietermaritzburg. As I understand it, I think they've actually been evicted from the building. Dr. Tandokolo Cele is a member of the ad hoc committee, which is representing unemployed doctors in that province. Dr. Cele, good morning to you. What are you actually trying to do? What do you want the health department to do?
Morning and morning to the listeners. So we started a sit-in last week, Tuesday. We had 8 full days of it, and luckily we were able to secure the necessary meetings. And as of late, we can confirm that we were able to reach an amicable agreement between ourselves and the Department of Health in the province. But what had happened was that we had a march back in February to deliver a memorandum of demands as it pertains to the unemployment of doctors in the province in the midst of the healthcare crisis as we had determined it. Because the queues are getting longer every day. The waiting lists are long for people to have necessary interventions as it pertains to either chemo or surgical interventions. So it did not make sense to us to have a situation where there is a plight of unemployment of about 150 doctors at that time. Numbers kept decreasing because other provinces were able to hire doctors. So it did not make sense that there will be doctors sitting at home whereas they are readily available to serve the community.
What this thing always boils down to is whether the department has the money to employ people. It's about money for posts. Are your people, your members, including yourself, I presume, now actually going to get posts? Is there money to pay you?
Yes. Well, we had lengthy discussions with them. We have had 3 meetings during the sit-in. The first one was last week Wednesday. And what became apparent at that time was that there were some issues with regards to the pronouncement that was made by both the Ministers of Finance and the Ministers of Health, because they had actually made a vow that doctors are going to be employed by the 1st of April. But when the budgets were we looked at, it appeared as though there was no actual budget that was allocated to that effect. So it wasn't difficult for them to just take the decision or put it into effect for us to be hired by the 1st of April. And that was actually the major reason we then took it to Natala to await these appointment letters that we had been promised. So we have had negotiations, and with the intervention of the MEC, further appealing to the national government for more budget. As it stands, there is money for us to be hired.
All right, thank you very much indeed, Dr. Thando Qolo-Cele, member of the ad hoc committee representing unemployed doctors in KwaZulu-Natal. Looks like there's an amicable solution there and that situation is going to be resolved in a moment. More on yesterday's electoral court decision around former President Jacob Zuma. We'll hear from his political party, Umkhonto we Sizwe. You're with SFM leading the conversation at 7 o'clock.
In our top stories, MK Party welcomes electoral court's decision and Biden calls for temporary ceasefire in Gaza. Good morning. We start with election news. Umkhonto we Sizwe Party spokesperson Nhlamulo Ndlela says they welcome the decision by the Electoral Court to rule in favour of former President Jacob Zuma's bid to remain on the MK Party list ahead of the elections. The former president approached the Electoral Court after the IEC upheld an objection to his candidacy. The Electoral Court gave the order in favour of Zuma yesterday. Ndlela says this is a spiritual process.
MK Party, for it being established and being really a catalyst of change for the people. It is clear that this is what our ancestors want, and what we're seeing here is based on what's happening. It's a spiritual process. I can't say much more than that. But I think what's also important to note is that we've continuously said that there's all sorts of attempts towards this process of us getting back President Zuma in the union buildings as our president. The people want him there. The people want him to lead.
ANC National Chairperson Gwede Mantashe says the ANC will do well in the province of KwaZulu-Natal in the upcoming elections. Mantashe also remained mum on the portion he thinks the party would attain at the 29th May polls. Experts predict the newly formed Umkhonto we Sizwe party may result in the ANC dropping below 50% in the upcoming elections. Mantashe spoke to SABC journalist Samkelo Maseko yesterday.
I can tell you, Samkelo, putting my neck on the block, we're going to have good results in KZN. And the most troublesome party to us will be the FP, not the MK. MK is there as a spoiler. So a spoiler is a problem if it takes from you. But if it takes from everybody else, even those who celebrate it, get shocked when by-elections come, because they find that people move from those parties to the MK party.
Schooling and health services have been affected by recent heavy rains in Kromkrel village in the northwest province. The village has experienced multiple flooding incidents. Several roads and houses have been damaged. Mureletele local municipality spokesperson Mutupi Malibye.
Residents in Botla, Matives Tatar, DP and Magwani are pleading for the help to channel the water away from their houses. Moretele local municipality mayor, Councillor Masambo George Manyeke, wanted the public to avoid crossing flooded waterways. Low water breaches should be avoided at all costs because it can be dangerous.
The Home Affairs Minister Aaron Motsoaledi says the issuing process of critical skills visa has been amended but not changed, meaning individuals will no longer have to wait 4 years for the special visa. Motsoaledi briefed the media on the amended immigration regulations yesterday. During the 2022 State of the Nation address, the President mentioned that South Africa will be reviewing the entire visa system to make it easier for foreign nationals and investors to apply for visas such as tourist, business and work. Motsoaledi says there has been a recommendation of the introduction of a remote work visa.
There are people who want to stay in South Africa, but while they are working for other countries, in other words, they are not employed by South Africa. They are employed by other countries, mostly in the fields of auditing, IT, finance. Those areas you can do them for your employer while you are not in that particular country. So we allow them the remote work visa to come and sojourn in South Africa while they are working for those particular countries.
And finally, U.S. President Joe Biden has called on Israel to agree to a 6 to 8 week ceasefire in its war against Hamas in Gaza. Speaking to a television station, Biden said the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was making a mistake with the way he was conducting the war. The ceasefire call marks a shift from his previous position that it's the responsibility of Hamas to agree to a truce and hostage deal. Biden also called for uninterrupted access for food and medicine to enter the besieged territory.
What I'm calling for is for the Israelis to just call for a ceasefire, allow for the next 6-8 weeks total access to all food and medicine going into the country.
Recapping the top story, Mkhonto weSizwe Party spokesperson Nhlamulo Ndlela says they welcome the decision by the Electoral Court to rule in favour of former President Jacob Zuma's bid to remain on the MK party list ahead of the elections. For SFM News, I am Anne Musa.
A very good morning to you in your SFM Sports headlines. Soccer in a heartbreaking finish for Banyana. Nigeria clinched a spot at the Paris Olympics with a narrow win. And in rugby, the Bulls coach Jake White speaks out on the logistical hurdles for South African teams in European competitions. Full details coming up just before 7:30.
SAFM. Guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Where possible, avoid the M2 highway into Joburg this morning between Benrose and the Crown Interchange. A single vehicle's overturned, one lane open, and the queue is enormous. So you want to off-ramp at Benrose, off-ramp at Denver to avoid the worst of that. Also, crash on the N12, Southern Bypass eastbound between Uncle Charlie's and Xavier Street. That's quite heavy, with queues pushing back in towards Deepcliff Interchange territory. Bayers Nordier, very heavy this morning for motorists coming from Fairland. There's a queue and a half down towards the Cresta area. Reports of a closure of the R61, southern parts of KZN, just in fact across the border there. So if you're moving Port Edward from KZN into Eastern Cape on towards Bazana, just as you get across the border territory in the R61, that section is closed. That's the Bazana road, and there's also more protesting between Bazana and Kokstad on that R394 at Papeni. So that whole sort of R61 394 should be avoided this morning. Still very heavy at Escort, big queues into an earlier truck crash just on the south side of Escort. That's a massive delay if you are Durban bound this morning. And a crash on Cape Town's M3 inbound at the top of Wynberg Hill, pushing traffic back beyond Constantia. The M3 inbound towards that crash is particularly heavy. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
7 minutes after 7, good morning. You're with SAFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes as well. As you know, I think the election, I made the point at the start of the show, I think the election and the polls and the campaigning and all the rest have now been sort of jolted, electrified, maybe is the word, by yesterday's Electoral Court decision allowing former President Jacob Zuma to stand as a candidate for Mkhonto weSizwe for Parliament. Well, we'll hear from MK themselves, hear their voice on this particular subject, get some analysis on it with Dr. Ralph Mateka as well. And then also 14 days of no load shedding and a promise by the Deputy President Paul Mashatile that load shedding will be over by the end of the year. How seriously can we take that? We'll hear from Chris Yelland. 8 after 7, good morning.
Ready Steady Cook South Africa. The Thriller Minute Daily Treat is sure to spice up your Monday to Friday menu from Monday 18 March at 7 p.m. If you and someone you know think you're ready and steady to cook along the esteemed chefs on this juicy television show, you can WhatsApp the producers on 068 675 2542. Channel your inner 5-star chef with Ready Steady Cook. Weekdays at 7 p.m. only on.
The boys of Steve Barker resist to leave the pitch without a ticket to the semis. But there's a big problem. Kevin Hunt's boys say the last dance of happiness belongs to them. This is the Nedbank Cup quarterfinal battle. Stellies versus Matsatsansa Pitori on Saturday, 13 April at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC 1 and SABC radio stations. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Big stories of the day. Hashtag SAFM Sunrise.
9 after 7, good morning. Well, the Electoral Court has now overturned the decision of the Electoral Commission to uphold an objection against former President Jacob Zuma against standing as a candidate from Umkhonto we Sizwe in the elections. This means Zuma can now be a candidate to go to Parliament from Umkhonto we Sizwe. The Electoral Court has not yet given its reasons for the decision. It will release a full judgment in the next few days, probably only next week. The IEC has said it notes the judgment and that it would like to see the reasons for the decision and that it is taking legal advice on the matter. The Constitution says anyone convicted of an offence and sentenced to more than 12 months imprisonment is disqualified from being in Parliament for 5 years after the handing down of that sentence. 3 years ago, the Constitutional Court issued Zuma with a 15-month sentence for contempt of court after he refused to continue with his testimony at the Zondo Commission. Well, let's hear now from former President Zuma's political party, Umkhonto we Sizwe. Their spokesperson is Nhlamulo Ndlela. Nhlamulo, good morning. Thank you for your time this morning.
Good morning, Stephen, and good morning to your listeners.
You must be very pleased at this decision.
We are ecstatic. We are very, very pleased at the outcome. This is a win for not only the people of this country that were hopeless, I'm talking the downtrodden people, and more so it's a win for MK's rights and President Zuma's political rights, and MK in the form of it having being given the choice, and it's having its right to choose a candidate, or should we say its preferred candidate in the form of President Zuma.
We don't yet have the formal reasons for this decision. I don't know if you've spoken to Advocate Mpho or any of the other people in the legal team. Do you have any insight at this stage into why the Electoral Court made the decision that it did? Do you know why they went this way?
Well, we don't know the reasons, but we can talk to the merits of our appeal. And it's three-pronged. One being on the issue of bias, as it pertains to, Janet Love's pronouncements on the 24th of January, where she said, off the back of a question that she was asked about President Zuma, that President Zuma is not eligible to stand for candidacy, or therefore, should we say, his candidature. Then what is concerning is, and which is what we raised around bias, that she then goes and presides over the same a commission that upholds this objection, but also citing the wrong legislation of the law in a form of Section 47(1)(e). So that in of itself then obviously becomes the second, should we say, the grounds at which we then lodged our appeal. And look, Section 47(1)(e), Stephen, is a piece of legislation that gives powers to the National Assembly to make a determination on membership, not for the IEC to make a determination and to invoke on the basis of candidacy. So, yeah, there's that element as well.
Just to be clear, and this is going to sound like splitting hairs, and I don't mean to, but I'm sure there's going to be more lawyers looking at all of this when it comes out. So former President Zuma is now a candidate. He'll be your candidate. He'll be on the list of candidates.
Correct.
And is it the intention of MK that after the elections, former President Zuma is in the National Assembly as a member of Parliament after the elections?
Well, that's the will of the people that we've been consulting, engaging with in all our rallies, and also civil society that we've, consulted with. People want to see President Zuma as president of this country, And if that is the case, President Zuma, being a selfless leader that he is, and remember, Stephen, one of the things we need to take into consideration, and I think I need to make this clear, President Zuma has been a president before. He's not hungry for power. So for him to come out of retirement off the back of the call of the people who have consulted and who have said that this country is not the same, President Zuma. We need you because we know under your administration and presidency, the country was different. So, he is taking a risk here, also taking a risk as it pertains to his benefits. So it just shows you the kind of man we're dealing with here in the form of President Zuma, that he's a selfless man who puts this country and its people first.
Okay, you say he's not hungry for power, but he is campaigning for power, isn't he?
Well, he's not campaigning for power. He's campaigning to lead the people who want him in power.
Okay. As I understand it, there may be, I don't know, but there may be a different legal reason that would stop him from being president again, because he served one full term, and I think it was 4 years of a second term. I realize, again, we're in unprecedented times. We haven't had a case like this before. But you would probably need 2/3 to make sure that he was president, because you'd have to change the constitution.
Well, these elections are watershed elections, Stephen, and I think you've put it correctly so. So look, from where we're sitting, and we've always said this is a spiritual process. No one can ever tell what the outcomes are going to be, but there's one thing we are gunning for is a 2/3 majority. President Zuma, yes, you eloquently put it, has served 2 terms in a form of 9 years. If people, and this in this case is what we want, want President Zuma in there for another full term, then we need to vote to change the constitution, isn't it? We need to vote and ensure we get a 2/3 majority. But as you put it, President Zuma will make that determination at that point in time, and we'll do an analysis and make a conclusion then.
Do you think this decision is going to give you as MK a lot more energy on the campaign trail?
Oh, we've had a lot of energy, Stephen. I'm sure you've seen that. And we've been confident. And, in all the interviews I've taken, I've always mentioned confidently so that, we are going to win this case because we could just see that the merits thereof, quite honestly, were frivolous. And also, let's not forget the other third point that I wanted to make around remission. So, we were quite confident that we have a solid case. And in this case, IEC erred on the side of error, and here we are.
Ntlamulo Ntlela, thank you very much indeed. Spokesperson for the political party Umkhonto weSizwe, you with SAFM, 16 minutes after 7, listening to that. The political analyst, Dr. Ralph Matega. Dr. Matega, good morning to you. I think many people didn't see this decision coming. How does the decision by the Electoral Court change the elections, change the campaigning?
Good morning, Stephen. Pleasure talking to you, and good morning to SAFM listeners. This is a very significant decision, Stephen. But as this tension got underway, the court hearing and the whole contest and the public statements were made by different parties about this, Stephen. I also thought about the risk that this decision could actually, this case could bring had it gone the other way. The question of the integrity of the election. I'm not saying that disqualification of a single party could do that, but if you could have elections that have got less and less of that, and you have you leave decisions to voters, because voters are seeing all of these things. People can say what they want to say about their leaders and so forth, but voters are seeing this. You leave it to voters. You then protect the integrity of the election, and I really think it was a sound decision from that point of view, Stephen, whereby you really, the significance of this election, you want to stay further away from controversy as possible, as reasonable as possible, Stephen.
Can you see Zuma in the National Assembly again? Is he going to ask, presumably, President Ramaphosa questions in Parliament?
This thing in Parliament, you know what? There is something I'm struggling with here, Stephen, and I think you asked this to the spokesperson. It is about the legality, the requirement, and the regulation. President Jacob Zuma is a former president. He enjoys privileges. I don't know what the handbook says here, Stephen, because there are certain privileges that include the budget that he gets as the former president. And I think, and I speak subject to correction here, Stephen, but if he gets another salary from Parliament, he might lose those. And I think he's aware of that. I don't think President Jacob Zuma would want to. And I think the spokesperson who was answering that question was almost aware of that crisis, because you are asking very clearly, is President Jacob Zuma going to be in Parliament? And they're saying President Jacob Zuma will be mobilizing rallies. You can see clearly that there is no intention of going into Parliament. But I think, though, in the most extreme case here, it's where President Jacob Zuma becomes the president again, legalities as well. And I think the only thing he would be willing to fight for is that of becoming the president again. But I don't think he would be much interested in tossing around being a backbencher.
Okay, so in other words, it depends probably on the result that MK gets.
Exactly. And I don't think that, Stephen, this party is very interesting. It's coming at a time that we're seeing this political fragmentation. Main parties are battling to hold up. If you listen to press conferences by main dominant parties, actually you hear them, they're yelling at smaller parties throughout. It could be different language, different ways. So this party is coming through, Stephen, and I do think that in regions such as KZN, and I do think when we're headed into coalition, it's anyone's game. You just don't know what's going to happen, but you can't dismiss that role.
Who gets hurt? In other words, who loses votes because of this decision? I mean, off the top of my head, I suppose the ANC and the IFP, and I don't know, maybe the EFF, but probably the ANC and the IFP?
Symbolically, all of them as well. I mean, the ANC mostly, of course, because remember the ANC has been pushing the idea that this party should not be registered. They lost. And I think they would be standing to benefit from disqualification of President Jacob Zuma. Now they've got President Jacob Zuma who's going to be on the ballot. It's going to be all over the posters as well for this party. So the ANC, I think, will be affected. I mean, they are actually fishing in the same pond. I mean, how are they going to differentiate themselves against each other? Very interesting. Your EFF, your IFP. In the region, in KZN, I would say the IFP is going to be the most head in the ANC. But mostly, the IFP will be the ANC. Mostly, they are already seeing challenges there. But the IFP, I think, is going to have challenges as well, significant ones.
One of the things and one of the difficulties is, and I'm a talking head for a living, so in a way I create my own difficulty, but we have to talk about the electoral court ruling without seeing the judgment, without seeing the reasons. And that means, and I worry that over the next week or so, because this, as you say, a very significant decision, affecting the elections, probably affecting the outcome of the elections in a material way, and we're going to have a huge amount of discussion and speculation and debate and, dare I say, argument about a decision that we don't know the reasons for.
I mean, Stephen, the reasoning here is very important. I mean, I was just reading a Daily Maverick piece here that, with emphasis that there is no reasoning on this thing. That's important. And I think that here, that's where the challenge is, because as much as I appreciate the political implications of this decision, that it is a sound decision, it will not throw our election into a crisis, which is the risk that we do not want, especially in elections such as this. The decision cannot just be purely political. It cannot just be based on political calculations, otherwise we'll have no rule. We need to understand how it is being reasoned. It needs to be legal. It needs to be justifiable. So I think that is why this anticipation on the reasoning of this judgment, that people are going to be looking at it to see what happened. Are we going to have a precedent here? Can we have a precedent here? And we're talking about President Jacob Zuma again. And quite controversial there as to what type of president will likely come out of this, if it can be legally justifiable as well.
Dr. Ralph Mateja, thank you, the political analyst. Do appreciate the time. You with SAFM. Your views, 086 000 2032, 22 after 7.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
Well, we're currently on day 14 with no load shedding. And there was a comment, maybe a promise by Deputy President Paul Mashatile yesterday that government or Eskom will be able to end load shedding by the end of the year. Need I remind you, we've heard this promise before. Chris Yelland is the Managing Director at EE Business Intelligence. Chris, good morning.
Morning, Stephen, to you and your listeners.
2 weeks of no load shedding, a promise that there'll be no load shedding by the end of the year. Can we believe the promise this time?
Look, a promise is by a politician is a very flexible thing, as we've seen in the past. So my view is that there is a noticeable improvement. It's very welcome. And the signs are that unplanned breakdowns so far this year, the first 13 weeks of this year, are indeed consistently lower than they were for the same period last year, and that's a very good thing. This also gives Eskom additional room, space, headroom to do much needed maintenance at a higher level. And again, the data shows this very clearly that for the first 13 weeks of this year, planned outages have significantly increased consistently over this 13-week period. But those two things are kind of offsetting each other. On the one hand, there's more availability because of less unplanned breakdowns, but there's less availability due to increased planned maintenance. But the bottom line is this is all a good thing. It's giving Eskom sufficient space. But it does beg the question, because the energy availability factor remains essentially the same as it was for the last 13 weeks. So why are we getting this reduced load shedding?
I mean, and is that because the private sector is producing more than it ever has before, and many people are producing their own electricity at home?
Yes, that's one of the reasons, a very important reason, but there are others as well. So, for example, the economy of South Africa is pretty much flat. So we're not seeing the growth in the economy that would require significant increase in electricity generation. And at the same time, the energy intensity of South Africa is decreasing significantly over the last several years. You know, in the past, South Africa was a very energy-intensive economy, driven by these large energy-guzzling smelters and large chemical operations. So we've been seeing a move in South Africa away from these energy-intensive industries towards more lighter manufacturing and services industry. And this move towards reduced energy intensity is also having an impact. But as you say, at the same time, there's been a very, very significant increase in self-generation driven by security of supply. And we're also increasingly driven by the economics, the savings that can be made. So there's been a big uptick in rooftop solar PV, battery energy storage, both at residential, commercial, industrial, mining, agricultural, and even the large renewable energy projects, utility scale projects are making a significant difference, and they're coming to the grid now.
We're heading into winter. Obviously, that's the moment of highest demand. Are we really going to get through winter with... I mean, this time last year, we were talking about stage 6, and at one point, the sort of prediction from the forecast for Eskom was that there might be stage 8 load shedding. We didn't get there. But I presume that we should have a better winter.
Stephen, winter is not necessarily the worst period of the year in terms of load shedding. And in fact, if you look at the very first stage 6 load shedding that we had in South Africa happened in December 2019. Not in the middle of winter, but in the middle of summer. And we experienced stage 6 load shedding last year, even in the summer months, the autumn months, the spring months, and the winter months. So I just want to say that, yes, demand for electricity is higher in the winter months, but so is the supply of electricity higher in the winter months because Eskom does less maintenance, so there's more generation available for that. And the plant has been maintained during the summer months, so it's better prepared for the winter months. But that doesn't mean to say we're not going to have load shedding in winter. I'm just trying to say that we shouldn't just think that winter is automatically worse.
Chris Yellen, thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate the time. Managing Director at EE Business Intelligence. You were there, SFM, leading the conversation. It's 27 minutes now after 7 o'clock.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning. Heartbreak for Banyana.
I know, a tough exit for them as their Olympic dreams dashed by Nigeria's narrow victory. The game at Loftus ended goalless last night after 90 minutes, but the Nigerians go through thanks to their winning last week, and that was the first leg. The score there was 1-0. Now, the two teams ranked number 1 and 2 on the continent were looking to get back to the Olympics, having missed out at the 2020 Tokyo Games, which took place in 2021 due to the global COVID-19 pandemic. Elsewhere, Manchester City drew 3-3 with Real Madrid at the Bernabeu, leaving the Champions League quarter-final tie in the balance. Here's Real Madrid coach Carlo Ancelotti.
It was an exciting game. Both teams, I said yesterday, with all that we see on the pitch, of course, it will be a fantastic game. A lot of quality, two fantastic teams. I think the result was correct. And then we have the game in Manchester. I think from our side, we are satisfied for what we did, and we hope to repeat in the same way in Manchester.
In the meantime, Arsenal and Bayern Munich also drew. The score 2-2 at the Emirates Stadium, leaving their Champions League quarter-final finally positioned for next week's second leg. Rugby now, with the Bulls boss Jake White insisting that the challenges of travelling to Europe at short notice undermines South Africa's team chances to be competitive in the EPCR competitions. The Pretoria outfit will face Northampton Saints in the quarterfinals of the Champions Cup for the first time on Saturday at the Sin Stadium in Franklin Gardens. As only the South African team left in the Champions Cup, one would expect SA Rugby to give them the best possible scenario to make it a successful challenge.
Well, we're playing the champions of URC next week. That's what people forget. And now it doesn't matter whether people go, yeah, but it's at Loftus and all that. They are the champions of URC. They came away from home and beat Stormers, who were the current holders last year, as we all know. They're out of the European Cup. They've got 2 weeks to prepare. And they're going to be as prepared as they can for 2 weeks to play the Bulls in a game that we need to win and they need to win if we're going to stay alive in hosting playoff games at Loftus.
Tennis action, the world number one Novak Djokovic making an emphatic start at the Monte Carlo Masters with a 6-1, 6-2 win over Russia's Roman Safulin to ease into the third round. And now on Sunday, Djokovic overtook Roger Federer as the oldest number one ranked player in ATP rankings history at 36 years and 321 days. And finally, golf. Tiger Woods saying he's fit enough to win the Masters this year. The 15-time major winner has struggled to overcome back surgery, but insisted he can still get one more if all comes together.
If everything comes together, I think I can get one more. I have not thought about being a starter here, no.
But I mean, in a more immediate sense, in terms of playing, when you maybe don't think that all things can come together and you can win, as you do right now.
Well, Mark, I still think they can. So I don't know when that day is, when that day comes, but I still think that I can. I haven't got to that point where I don't think I can't.
We'll bring you more sport. Top of the hour, I'm Sai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. We get an update on schools in the Western Cape after the flooding there in the next few moments. Hear from you as well, your reaction to the Electoral Court ruling around former President Jacob Zuma. You're with SFM leading the conversation. Day 14 of No Load Shedding, 7:30.
Good morning. In the headlines, the Powers and Privileges Committee will today receive an update on the complaint laid by the DA against former National Assembly Speaker Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula. DA Chief Siviwe Gwagobe wants the committee to investigate Mapisa-Nqakula following the salary increase of the Secretary to Parliament Xolile George. Umkhonto weSizwe Party spokesperson Ntlamulo Ndlela says they welcome the decision by the Electoral Court to rule in favour of former President Jacob Zuma's bid to remain on the MK party list ahead of the elections. And the High Court in Polokwane, Limpopo is today expected to conclude judgment in the murder trial of 5 men accused of killing Collins Jabane Mayor Moses Maluleke. I'll have details on these and other stories at 8.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Very heavy on Joburg's Crown interchange area. An earlier crash on the M2 into Crown, just before the Crown interchange. Still got traffic back from Benrose. Very heavy on that M2 inbound. And then at the same time, there's also been a crash on the Mike 1 North, just up through the Crown, around Smith Street, between Smith Street and Empire Road. So the Mike 1 now heavy from Gold Reef City. And the M2 delays are staying there because of problems getting through that M2 and onto the M1. Also, Joe Slovo up through the Duranfontein area, heavy with diverting traffic away from the M2. And then there's some traffic lights further up in Houghton Drive and Castle Gowrie, so lots of delays outside of Joburg today. N3 North, very heavy from Jervis and Alberton. Looks like an issue inside Galulis. The N3 queues heavily towards that off-ramp to the N12 eastbound. A crash coming out of Soweto on the N17 before the N1. That's heavy. And a collision between Uncle Charlie's and Xavier Street on the N12 eastbound, causing delays from Deepcliff as you head direction Alberton this morning. R21 still queuing at Clayville. That's into the roadworks on your way towards the airport. The run down the Dustport Tunnel in Pretoria staying very heavy. Bremer Street from Vanderhof down through the tunnel onto Transorania down to Vomhagen. That's a really big delay today. Durban's M13 slow and sluggish from Hillcrest all the way down Fields Hill towards Pinetown. M7 queuing towards the Bluff. Not as bad as it can do, but there is a backlog of traffic through towards Bel Air and Wakesley. And Cape Town, if you're leaving Somerset West on your way to Stellenbosch, that's all very heavy. Crash on Broadway Boulevard at the N2. Another crash on the R44 just past Winery Road. And then traffic lights down at Annandale Road. So there's all sorts of delays there. And the M3 inbound is heavy. An earlier crash at the top of Weinberg Hill means a delay coming through right back past Constantia and all the way through towards Paradise Road in the Bishop's Court area. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The Business Update on SAFM.
With our business show host, Jimmy Mayaha. Jimmy, good morning. How are the markets this morning?
Morning, Stephen. Markets are in the green in some cases. If we start overnight, South African markets closed out about 0.1% in the green. US markets, the Nasdaq was up 0.33%, with the S&P up about 0.1%. The Dow finished flat. And if we look at some of the Asian markets, starting with those that are trading flat at the moment as well, South Korean markets are sitting flat at the moment. Slightly down is the Chinese market, that's down about 0.33%, with the Hong Kong market up about 2%, Sydney's up about 0.33%, while Tokyo is down about 0.33%, and Indian markets are up about 0.33%. If we take a look at some commodities movements, the price of gold is up about 0.33% at $2,360 an ounce. Price of copper up just under 1/3. Price of platinum up 0.1%. The price of palladium down 0.1%, and the price of Brent crude oil holding around the $90 a barrel level, sitting at $89.50 a barrel, up about 0.1% there. If we look at some currency movements, the rand gaining some ground against the majors, sitting at 18 rand 44 against the dollar, 20 rand and 2 cents against the euro, and 23 rand and 38 cents against the British pound. Cryptocurrencies moves: Bitcoin just below 70,000, sitting at $69,340. Ethereum $3,534, and Solana down 3% at $172.
And then all eyes again on inflation.
Seems to be the theme for quite a number of months now. We've got U.S. inflation prints coming out today, and that's very important to look at from a data point of view. We know that we're anticipating U.S. Rate cuts will begin in the third quarter of this year, or the second half of the year. But if the inflation print proves to be somewhat of a hotter than expected print, we could see those interest rate cuts being delayed even further. The market has already gone through some turbulent times of late, with mixed readings from U.S. data points, particularly the jobs print that came through last week. And the sentiments are coming out of the U.S. Fed are that they are happy to keep higher for longer in place if it means that they get the inflation battle under control in the long term. So today's inflation print will be a very telling sign of where we could potentially see U.S. markets being positioned, and in turn where we could potentially see global central banks start to cut rates. We're expecting from South Africa's perspective that'll happen around August or July of this year, so still quite a bit away from there. But again, the US markets seem to be driving this conversation.
And then a WBC listing on the JSE today.
Yes, We Buy Cars finally getting their listing day. We've been building up to this for quite some time. We found out yesterday that we've got an indicative list price of around 18 rand and 75 cents, with an expected market cap of just shy of 8 billion rand. We're going to list today and hopefully see a good day of trading. Fair value by some analyst estimates sits probably around the mid 20 rand range, depending on who you're speaking to around that. But we know that from an indicative perspective, we're expecting to at least hit the market around that 18 rand level. So we'll keep an eye on that. We might even try and see if we can get the CEO of We Buy Cars to have a conversation with us on our show a little later on today, to just get a sense of the impact of the listing and what it means for the business going forward.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Jimmy Mayaha. Really do appreciate the time. Thank you. Our business show host, you'll hear him tonight. And of course, more business through the day here on SAFM. 23 minutes now to 8.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Well, as you can imagine, lots of reaction, of course, to that decision by the Electoral Court. Let's start with Sipho on the South Coast. Sipho, hi, good morning. The Electoral Commission and former President Zuma, go for it.
Yes, good morning. I don't want to read much on the outcome of this court case. One, possibly they just won by a technicality where the intention was just to kick the ball for the touch. That is, only the parliament will make the determination at the appropriate moment. But I think the actual intention is most likely just for electioneering purposes, where they think it would do them well to have Jacob Zuma on their campaign flyers and to attract that extra 2% or extra 1% of voters who are into Zuma as a brand.
Okay, so you think he won't go to Parliament?
That is, I think that is what they are. They are probably. They think that is what is going to happen. They just need him to be there and get as much votes as they can. And then, if it gets better than that, it's more like then an academic exercise. You remember the issue of Banega Mbete when she was called in the parliament during the Zuma cabinet, where she was before a deputy president, and she didn't step in for swearing because she was not called in second, where that means she would be guaranteed a deputy presidency. So Zuma is aware of that. So for that reason, they possibly don't actually intend getting him into parliament. I remember your speaker there was quite elusive on the point. But on the most unlikely scenario, where they think that they possibly can secure either some kind of a deal where they get into some coalition of the smaller parties and they get to be the kingmaker, kind of like with the dog wagging the tail, and they would have a stronger case to present that our candidate is an ex-president.
Well,
those are the scenarios.
Yeah. Sipho, there's so much that I think could happen now. Sipho on the South Coast, thank you. Jonathan Klaberge, hi, good morning. How do you feel?
Good morning, Stephen. So, I've got no issues with the ruling. The concern I do have, and I share the sentiment of the previous caller, I'm really questioning the intention of MK. Are they really genuine about it? Now, these are the same supporters, and when the President Jacob Zuma was sentenced to imprisonment, it was calls from the Zuma supporters that he needs to take rest. He's served his country well. He's old. He's frail. He's medical. And now these same supporters want him back into prison in Union Buildings. It's just the intentions of MK Party. Are they just using the Zuma brand? And are they genuine? That's all I wanted to comment about.
All right, Jonathan, interesting aspect. Hadn't thought of that. Thank you. And Ntlantla in Chatsworth. Hi, Ntlantla.
Stephen, how are you?
Yeah, I'm well. Go for it.
I'm good. You see, my brother, on the issue of Jacob Zuma, I'm glad it's coming to an end, and its coverage, it's going to come to an end too, because most people seem to focus on the issue of Zuma, while we've got certain bills that are going to be passed. And people are not coming out and talking about them, while they've got the right to raise their concerns and say what they wish, what they don't want. Pela bill, employment equity bill, and the expropriation bill. Those three bills, they concern about what's going to happen next year.
Sure. And Ntlantla, I don't think we're going to stop talking about President Zuma. I think we're going to talk about him for a long time to come.
The thing is, how we see our democracy and how do we want to improve our democracy. It shouldn't be about individual. It should be about how do we improve our constitution to work for us.
Okay. All right, Ntlantla. Sorry, Ntlantla, but I think we have heard you. Thank you. Bond on the line from Klaberge. Bond, hi, good morning. Educate us.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Stephen. Just give me about 4 minutes on this, ne?
Yeah.
Yeah.
First of all, I was shocked yesterday when I read this. I had to read it twice because I wanted to make sure that I'm reading correctly, and it was not an outdated order. I'm still reeling from shock. It should be a walk in the park. Let's start first with the 3 grounds advanced by the MK party, because in terms of the Electoral Act, it is stated that the Electoral Court must dispense with matters urgently. So I think it's unbelievable that they could issue an order without reasons. Those reasons must come within the next 72 hours by virtue of the urgency that is stated in the Act, not next week. That would defeat the purpose. An order must come with reasons. I expect that by Thursday or Friday. Yeah? Now, the first objection is that Janet Love presided, whereas she made out-of-court statements. With due respect, that is not enough to impugn the entire process of the Electoral Court from hearing the case. They should have raised the objection, not only in the papers, to say we want the presiding officer to recuse herself and make a substantive case of bias, and not only to argue it at the end. By not objecting before the hearing started, it means they abided or they agreed with her being there. Her statements will not affect the whole 5 membership of the IEC. The second one is about
she was appointed commissioner of the IEC by Zuma.
Yes, she was.
Yeah, in 2016. Yes.
Yes. And then the second one is that the Electoral Commission or Act, Electoral Court is not empowered to decide on a membership. If it has to be decided by the National Assembly, I'll make this simple analogy. A team trains for a match, whether it's soccer or rugby. It's not for the team players just on the verge of a match starting to decide who's fit enough, who's psychologically there. It's the coaching team that decides who must go into the team. All the 11 members, so it's soccer or rugby, not the team themselves. So the National Assembly, as soon as the members take an oath or affirmation, their business is not to determine who qualifies to be amongst us. It's to get on with the work of governing the country.
And there would be such a mess. I mean, there's no ways they would agree if that were the case. Yeah.
And they'll raise an objection, but they pass through the needle of eye of the needle of absolute. You don't have the right to do so. So if it's not the IEC and not the NA, who has that determination? The guiding light is the case of the Labour Party versus the IEC, where Judge Muki said the Electoral Court has got extensive jurisdiction to hear matters electoral. This is an electoral matter because it's in Section 19 of the Constitution that says every citizen has got the right to polka choice to be a candidate. You see, so it's the Electoral Commission or Electoral Court that has that determination. The last point is on sentence. The sentence that is imposed by the court is the determining factor of whether a person is eligible to be a member of the National Assembly, Section 47(1)(e), not the remitted sentence. There were 2,000 people that got remission. They were sentenced at different periods, at different times for different sentences. Their new sentences are not the period at calculated at the time of remission. Jacob Zuma's sentence will always be 15 months. It's not 3 months. So I'm saying all these arguments are what are called specious arguments, superficially believable but false in law. All those are special arguments. With respect, I think it's succeeded on special arguments. But you asked a question yesterday. The IEC, the Commission, has got the right to appeal to the Constitutional Court in terms of Section 167, 3A, which says the Constitutional Court is the highest court on all matters constitutional. This matter is a constitutional matter by virtue of it falling under Section 19, so it will have to hear it. But the reasons must come quickly because we're under time frames. It must come quickly. It's not the end of the matter. I'm very disappointed and I'm shocked. It flies against logic.
All right, Bond on the line from Gqeberha. As you know, Bond is a lawyer and a strong view from him. I'm sure there'll be other lawyers with different views, but there's, as I said at the beginning of the show, a lot to talk about in this case. 13 minutes to 8.
2 years since winning the EFC middleweight title in the most dramatic and controversial fashion, Luke Michael finally defends his belt for the very first time at EFC 112 against the imposing submission machine, J.P. Kruger. And in the co-main event, featherweight champion Iga Smiley Cabeza becomes the next athlete aiming for champ status as he battles the imposing Kaleka Block Kabanda. EFC 112 live this Thursday. Watch it on SABC Sport Channel on DTT Channel 4 from 7 p.m. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
There's a song that goes, "Money can't buy me love." And that's true. But then they told us all you need is love, which anybody with a mortgage will tell you most certainly is not true. Love won't pay your parking tickets or your student loan. It's also needy. It requires effort, availability, constant care. But more importantly, love requires time. And while money can't buy you love, it can certainly free up some of your time. Time to spend on the things you love, with the people you love. And if you're looking, maybe even time to find the one you love. That's why, after 50 years of investing, we've learned that time is the greatest gift of all. And the good news is, if you invest early, time gives you money. And then money gives you more time to do the things you love. And don't you love that about investing? Ellen Gray, long-term investing. Ellen Gray is an authorized FSP.
The boys of Steve Barker resist to leave the pitch without a ticket to the semis. But there's a big problem. Kevin Hunt's boys say the last dance of happiness belongs to them. This is the Nedbank Cup quarterfinal battle. Stellies versus Matsatsansa Pitori on Saturday, 13 April at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC1 and SABC radio stations. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Anyway, the Pretoria, the N14, just starting to queue up through the R55. Pretoria West exit on your way very slowly towards the Brockfontein interchange. Looks like you'll be asked to send some traffic there today. The N3 North stays very slow from Germiston up through Galuli's interchange. Problem is a breakdown, we think, inside Galuli's interchange. And the M2 and M1 routes are heavy through Crown. An earlier crash going into the Crown on the M2s. Traffic still very, very heavy from Benrose. And then the Mike 1, an earlier crash before Empire Road, still backing traffic from the Boyson side through the Crown and up through Brownfontein. Collision just after Uncle Charlie's on the N12 eastbound, so it's heavy from Deepcliff interchange on your way slowly through to Xavier Street. And a collision on the N17 coming out of Soweto this morning. The run up towards the M1 highway under pressure approaching that crash scene. If you're driving Durban side, the M7 still slow at St John's Avenue Bridge, but getting a lot better. The N3 inbound from Pavilion to Sherwood. Now there's a very interesting backlog. Not something you see every day, but that's heavy coming through Spaghetti Junction on your way to Durban. Queues between Kwamashu and Gateway. If you're on your way to the airport, that's looking heavy. It's the normal breakdown in the roadworks this morning on that section of the N2 North. And I just want to zoom up to Escort and give you an update there. Very heavy backlog still with us through Escort, down towards the Escort South exit and on towards the Hidcote direction, Moy River. That's an earlier truck crash, only one lane open, and the traffic stays very heavy. After a couple of days of storm, Stellenbosch schools have reopened, and you can see traffic all over Stellenbosch, just outside Cape Town. All your approaches are jam-packed. There's also a crash on the R44 leaving Somerset West at Winery Road, and then no traffic lights at Annandale. So the R44 from Somerset West looking particularly heavy. And Cape Town, an earlier crash on the M3 at Wynberg Hills being sorted out, but the traffic's heavy this morning. Can stand you right through to the UCT exit. Rob Burton, SAFM Traffic.
Channel your inner adventurer on Top Travel this Saturday night at 8:30 on S3 as Fez and Anesu are in Limpopo for tea with a rooibos-loving hippo named Jessica. Jumping off Graskop Gorge in Mpumalanga, Fez screams from the top all the way to the bottom. But standing at God's window will leave anyone speechless. That's Top Travel this Saturday night at 8:30. Repeat Sunday at 1 p.m. on S3.
2 years since winning the EFC middleweight title in the most dramatic and controversial fashion, Luke Michael finally defends his belt for the very first time at EFC 112 against the imposing submission machine, J.P. Kruger. And in the co-main event, featherweight champion Iga Smiley Cabeza becomes the next athlete aiming for champ status as he battles the imposing Kaleka Block Kabanda. EFC 112 live this Thursday. Watch it on SABC Sport Channel on DTT Channel 4 from 7 p.m. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
8 minutes to 8 the time. Good morning. Well, let's get an update quickly on the situation in the Western Cape after the intense weather, the unbelievable winds that they saw, the intense rain they saw over the weekend and through Monday as well. One of the biggest problems has been schools. Hundreds of schools were closed on Monday and yesterday. The Education MEC in the Western Cape is David Mania. MEC, good morning, and sorry to keep you on hold for so long. MEC, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Oh, sorry about that. Obviously, you had to close some schools over the weekend. It looks like you've been able to open all schools today.
We have opened all schools today. At the height of the storm, we had closed 406 schools, which affected 270,000 learners. We've opened all schools today. But there are about 8 schools that will remain closed, and those schools are predominantly schools that have suffered severe infrastructure damage.
And the schools that are opening, the vast majority of them, have you had to go and check if all of those structures are safe? I mean, I imagine you can tell pretty quickly if there's bad damage.
So I'm very proud of our infrastructure team. Our contractors were out within hours at schools on Sunday, assessing infrastructure damage, affecting temporary repairs where they could, and they obviously are now starting with permanent repairs at the most affected schools in the Winelands and Overberg districts.
I mean, it must cost a fortune to fix some of these schools. I mean, the winds that we saw in the Western Cape were incredible.
Well, there has been significant infrastructure damage. We are in the process of assessing that damage, and then more importantly, our finance team are in the process of costing the damage. It is something I am concerned about. I will probably have a better understanding of the financial impact within the next 24 or 48 hours, and then our challenge is, how do we finance it? We do have an emergency infrastructure budget, but we may need to reprioritize funds within our budget, or indeed, depending on the quantum, approach provincial treasury for additional funds so that we can effect these repairs quickly and make sure that all the schools are open and functional in the Winelands and Overberg districts here in the Western Cape.
Once the money's sorted out, do you contract the contractors? Do you get the contractors directly, or do you have to go through any other departments? Can you do it sort of, from the education department directly to the supplier?
The education department has a set of primary contractors, and we were able to access those contracts and get contractors on site on Sunday. In fact, when I visited Grootes Heerville Primary School in Drakenstein, which had experienced significant infrastructure damage, particularly with significant parts of the roof having blown off, the contractors were in fact already on site doing temporary repairs. The challenge now, of course, is to effect permanent repairs at that school and many others here in the Western Cape.
MEC, thank you very much indeed. The Western Cape Education MEC, David Mania.
At SFM Radio and at Stephen Grootes on Twitter.
Well, you heard Bond, the attorney, giving us his view of yesterday's electoral court judgment earlier. Bajo on the line from Soweto. You heard that. Do you agree with Bond?
Okay, Stephen, let me also declare, I'm also an attorney, but I practice mostly in labor issues.
Okay.
Yes, I have a serious problem with this Bond guy, and he comes on to the radio each and every time to make a assertion and somehow discuss things pertaining to the law. One is, and he must also declare whether he's giving legal advice and is acting on his capacity as an attorney, because that's problematic in terms of the LPC or the Act. So the issue is Bond hasn't had the privilege or maybe the knowledge of seeing the papers or reading through the papers. I'm driving, Stephen, now, and hence I'll try to be quick as much as I can. So he hasn't had the privilege of seeing the papers that were filed before the court. You see, the oral arguments were made before the court. If he had that chance or leeway to have seen, he would then come onto the radio and make these assertions he's making, Stephen. And Stephen has had many analysts, lawyers coming on the show and making all sorts of predictions. All those predictions have failed. So honestly, this Bond guy must just be honest with us and declare that he had read the papers and this is his conclusion. Anyway, his opinion cannot be the alpha and omega of this court case. Thank you, Stephen.
No, sure. All right, Bajo on the line from Soweto. I hear you. Look, when it comes to people phoning in, we obviously, the whole point of the show is that you call and talk and that we all sort of talk and listen and change our minds and argue sometimes and arm wrestle occasionally and discuss constructively, hopefully, most of the time. When people have a particular expertise in things, and we've had all sorts of people with all sorts of expertise phone in, I personally find that very useful, and I think that that's important. I think we need to hear from people. I mean, whether it's Moputle on science and the earth, as you know, is flat, or whether it's someone on the law, whether it's someone on politics, or someone who's just got a better memory than me, which is probably most people, and able to say, look, this is what happened 20 years ago, I was there, or whatever. We want to hear from you. Obviously, I'm very aware that some people might use that and try and bring disinformation. I don't see Bond doing that at all, I must just say. The other thing is that what I would call an honestly held opinion. In other words, you and I and everyone else can discuss it with each other, but if your opinion is honestly held, then I think you must be allowed to express it. That's how I sort of see things. Obviously, it must be factual. Maputte, I hope you're listening to that. Muzi on the line from eThekwini. Hi, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen. How are you?
Yeah, go for it.
Stephen, I'm very happy. I'm very happy because you remember I did call yesterday and
yes, it was you when I said no, I think it'll go the other way, but we must wait for the court to decide. It was you, wasn't it, Muzi?
It was me when you said what is his name? Our Talimpo got himself a fan.
Yes,
it was me.
Yes,
and
yes.
Yeah. Stephen, you see, I think what I was saying yesterday, I'm still saying it today. What is his name? The lawyer for the IEC.
Tembeke
Ngcukaitobi. I think he lost it somewhere. Honestly, he became so emotional. I think he took his feelings into the court. That's why he lost it.
Yeah.
Because honestly, he was not supposed to be emotional about it. You see, when he was saying that we cannot change the law just to accommodate Zuma, you could see that this man is emotional. He's speaking his feelings. That's why he lost it. And another thing, Stephen, what I'm thinking is that maybe IEC shouldn't bring his lawyers to fight cases like this, because now it's gonna look like it is IEC who is refusing some people to come into the parliament.
Yeah.
I think whoever is objecting, that person must bring his own representative into the court, and IEC must stand one side and wait for the court to decide.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I am very, very happy of what happened, and I feel vindicated of what happened yesterday.
Sure.
I'm very happy.
Muzi, good to hear from you again. Thank you. On the line from eThekwini. That's FM leading the conversation, 8 o'clock.
In our top stories, feedback regarding Secretary to Parliament salary increase, and MK Party welcomes Electoral Court's decision. Good morning. The Powers and Privileges Committee will today receive an update on the complaint laid by the DA against former National Assembly Speaker Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula. DA Chief Whip Siviwe Khwagube wants the committee to investigate Mapisa-Nqakula following the salary increase of the Secretary to Parliament Xolile George's salary was increased from 2.6 million to 4.4 million rand shortly after being appointed to the position. Abongwe Kobokana reports.
Parliament had revealed following media reports that George's salary was increased by up to 70%. Gwagube had then registered a complaint for Mapisa Nqakula to be investigated. She wrote to the acting speaker, Lichisa Tsinoli, when he was the deputy speaker, requesting the Powers and Privileges Committee to investigate the matter. Earlier, Gwagube indicated that she wants the matter to be finalized before the upcoming general elections.
In election news, Umkhonto weSizwe Party spokesperson Nhlamulo Ndlela says they welcome the decision by the Electoral Court to rule in favor of former President Jacob Zuma's bid to remain on the MK Party list ahead of the elections. The former president approached the Electoral Court after the IEC upheld an objection to his candidacy. The Electoral Court gave the order in favor of Zuma yesterday. Ndlela says this is a spiritual process.
MK Party, for it being established and being really a catalyst of change for the people. It is clear that this is what our ancestors want, and what we're seeing here is based on what's happening. It's a spiritual process. I can't say much more than that. But I think what's also important to note is that we've continuously said that there's all sorts of attempts towards this process of us getting back President Zuma in the union buildings as our president. The people want him there. The people want him to lead.
The SACP says defending the gains of freedom its late General Secretary Chris Hani fought for will be a fitting tribute as the country marks the 31st commemoration of his death. Hani was killed by Polish immigrant Janusz Walusz on this day in 1993. The party and its alliance partners, the ANC, COSATU and SANCO, will lay wreaths at Hani's grave later this morning. The event, organized by the Ekurhuleni municipality, will also be addressed by government officials. The SACP spokesperson Dr. Alex Mashilo says in as much as they celebrate the achievements of the democratic government, they acknowledge a lot still needs to be done.
There are certain things that Chris Hani wanted to see. In defining socialism in simple terms, he said it is about housing for the people, health for the people, education for the people. We all know that millions of our people have benefited from homes built and allocated to them for free by the state. In 1994, we had approximately 8.9 million people who were employed, and in 2023, we had 16.7 million people who were employed. That is a huge increase. These are the things we will be reflecting upon. We have to defend our democratic gains. This is how we want to remember Chris Hani.
The High Court in Polokwane in Limpopo is today expected to conclude judgment in the murder trial of 5 men accused of killing Collins Shabane Mayor Moses Maluleke. Judge Violet Simenya could not conclude reading her judgment yesterday. The accused Shumani Nemadodzi, Isaac Mudau, Wiseman Baloy, Funzo Lidzebe and Chianu Munyai were tried for killing Maluleke at his home at Shikundu village outside Malamulele in July 2022. Michael Makungo reports.
Judge Siminya's judgment started by detailing all the evidence that has been brought during the trial. The evidence includes documents that were accepted into evidence, such as a photo album of the crime scene, the post-mortem report, and Nemadodzi's police statement. Judge Siminya is expected to conclude her judgment today.
South Africa's energy grid is gradually stabilizing with at least 2,500 megawatts of new generation capacity expected in the coming 5 months. The Electricity Minister, Jose Nsuramogopa, has outlined what he calls a positive trend in minimizing the intensity of load shedding. He gave an update on the implementation of the Energy Action Plan, lauding the work done by Eskom in stabilizing the grid. He says stability of the leadership structure at Eskom, the support to the entity from Treasury, and delays in the decommissioning of some power stations is also starting to bear fruit.
The ramping up of plant maintenance, very important, and that's why I made the point earlier on that if you look at the period December 2023 going into January of 2024, we took out 18% of the total generation capacity, about 9,000 megawatts at a go for planned maintenance. And we're beginning to see that these machines are coming back into service, they are coming back on load, and they are adding to the capacity on the grid. And this is helping us to address, if you like, the demand.
Recapping the top story, the Powers and Privileges Committee will today receive an update on the complaint laid by the DA against former National Assembly Speaker Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula. The DA chief, Siviwe Gwagube, wants the committee to investigate Mapisa-Nqakula following the salary increase of the Secretary to Parliament, Xolile George. For SFM News, I am Anne Musa.
A very good morning to you in your SFM Sports headlines. It's soccer. Mamelodi Sundowns are charging into battle for the CAF Champions League title. They face a strong opposition from Esperance in the season's final. And cricket, Tasman Brits struck a magnificent century for the Proteas women, but their victory is washed away as rain interrupted the match against Sri Lanka in East London. Stay tuned for the details just before 8:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Well, good news from the Escort area. The big truck crash, an even bigger delay, is starting to move through. All lanes have just been reopened. There was one lane open since probably about 5 o'clock this morning, 5:05. So big backlogs to filter through there. But with that additional lane open, traffic is starting to move away quite nicely. Just staying in KZN, quite heavy if you're on your way to the airport. A breakdown before Gateway. Very heavy traffic, almost back as far as Queen Nandi Drive this morning. Pretoria, the traffic lights on the Transurania from Hagen Junction are not working, so there's a lot of traffic congestion just on the southern side of Dustport Tunnel. A crash earlier on Joburg's M2 West, still holding traffic very badly from Benrose coming into Crown Interchange, and heavy delays into Santon. Winnie Mandela from the high school at Bryanston all the way down to Santon Drive, and behind that Republic Road, really bad backlogs out of Randburg this morning to get into that Winnie Mandela traffic. Cape Town, the N1 inbound from around Plattekloof Hill to the city centre stays busy. The N2 from just after the airport around Robert Sobukwe busy all the way through to Hospital Bend. And there's just been a crash on Musenberg's Atlantic Road just by the train bridge there, so a bit of extra pressure in that area. And just down the road a little bit, there's a lot of delay this morning. Boys driving the main road, moving through Cork Bay, very heavy towards Clovelly on your way to Fishhook. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
9 after 8, good morning, you're with SFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. All right, well, lots going on this morning. We will talk about carbon capture in just a moment. I've never quite understood how that works. We'll speak to someone who does understand how it works. We'll also talk about health and work in a little while. And then your mediated conversation, I don't know if I've told you about it yet, but we were really struck as a team actually by the situation at the Temba Hospital in Mpumalanga near White River, and how this group of men are just going in there and causing chaos, assaulting doctors because they want tenders there. So we thought it's worth a mediated conversation. We'll talk about that. We'll get the view of security in other hospitals around the country and hear from the National Health Department about it. I think it would be quite important, so stick around for your mediated conversation from 8:30 this morning.
Conversations that you connect with and react to. SAFM.
Well, still, of course, as you can imagine, reaction coming through on 086 000 2032 to the electoral court's decision around former President Jacob Zuma. Chris and Peter Maritzburg, hi. You heard Muzi a little earlier. You want to respond to him?
Yes, and I'm very disappointed that he's bringing up budget arguments on a cogent legal arguments that this other caller was bringing up. To be honest, it can't be that the case was lost because Nuga Itobi was emotional. It honestly can't be, mature to think that the IEC should not go to court to defend its own decision.
Yeah.
It's not a decision of the objector. It became a decision of the IEC. That's why the IEC had to go and defend itself. But at the broader things, really, this is not about Zuma. It's about the pillage of our democracy. Slowly, the continuation of state capture and pillaging of our democracy. All what needs to happen is that we need to defend our democratic rules and the constitutional provision that a person with a criminal record should not go and stand. That's the fundamental thing that we're trying to protect here.
Yeah.
Not Zuma.
All right. No, Chris, I hear you. Thank you. As I say, strong views on this. Bonakele, how do you feel?
Hey, stuck on this N2 towards Cape Town, yeah.
this topic jam. But I'll be very quick because the topic of such around us behind. And
Bonakele, you shouldn't break the law to talk to us.
Yes, look, I'm disappointed with the ruling favoring the MK party and Study Jacob Zuma yesterday by the court. And the question I'm asking myself is the IEC going to just let it go? What will be the forward? Are they going to appeal against this decision?
I don't know. We don't know, and I don't think they know because we don't have the reasons for the judgment.
If they don't appeal, I would really be so disappointed. I must be honest. South Africans must hear that I don't need to be a president like Study Jacob Zuma now. It doesn't really make sense to me.
Yeah.
I mean, at his chance, he didn't do any understand. So, all in all, even with the decision or ruling they made that court yesterday, if it was because of the threats made by the MK party, well, it means we're definitely not going to trust our courts, so to speak,
Yeah.
So I'm really disappointed, I must be honest.
All right, Bonakele, thank you on the line from Cape Town. Disappointment there. Well, we've heard lots of different views on this, as you would expect. It is an emotional issue. And I've made the point many times that, I think when it comes to former President Zuma, I don't know if anyone has I don't know if the right word is divided, but created discussion more than he has over the last 20 years. 13 after 8.
Big stories of the day. #SAFM Sunrise.
Well, as you know, we're in the middle of a global transition from using fossil fuels to power our lives to using renewables. In the middle of this is the issue of carbon capture. In other words, instead of pumping carbon or pollution into the air from generating electricity or from industry, somehow capturing that carbon. This conversation is brought to you by the Council for Geoscience. And Kondi Nkokwana is the Carbon Capture Utilization and Storage Project Manager at the Council for Geoscience. And Kondi, good morning. Thanks so much for your time this morning.
Good morning, Stephen and listeners.
Firstly, what is carbon capture? How does it work?
Thank you, Stephen. Carbon capture and storage and utilization is a technology that involves capturing the carbon dioxide from the point of emitters, such as the coal-fired power stations, as we've seen in the Mpumalanga province with a lot of coal production for our energy generation in that particular area. In this particular respect, we capture the CO2 from this point of emitters, transport it to geological formations, deep-seated geological formations that have been carefully chosen to make sure that we can securely store the CO2 and be able to monitor it for long-term safe storage in those formations.
Okay, so it leaves the power station as a smoke. You're able to turn it into a solid. I don't know how you do that. And then you transport it somewhere else.
Yes, we can capture it and convert it into what is called a supercritical state to be able to transport it and to be able to inject it into the geological formations.
Okay, you put it underground.
And put it underground and making sure that while it's underground, we're able to quantify how much of it we stored underground and be able to also monitor it to make sure that it stays there safely for long-term storage.
So, I mean, this would allow us then to keep our coal-fired power stations and our coal mines and the whole industry around that operating for much longer.
Yes, that's correct. That's in the just transition context, that we're able to continuously produce our energy using our coal reserves that we are very well blessed with, and making sure that we continuously use that in a sustainable manner, balancing the socio-economic requirements as well as our energy security.
Is this technology being used in other places? Are we doing it any differently from what other people are doing?
It's been widely used in the United States, for instance, and across Europe and Asia as well. There's various ways that it has been done in terms of the possible geological storages that you can explore, depending on the geology that the country is blessed with. So in South Africa, we've got a variety of these geological options to consider. One is storing it in saline aquifers. One is also looking at depleted coal seams and utilizing those to store the CO2. In our case, at this point, we're looking at storing it in basalt, in the rock formation called basalt, through what we call the mineralization. In other words, you inject the CO2 into the rock and allow it to react with the minerals in the rocks that allow the CO2 to be trapped And that comes with an added benefit of making sure that there's security in that CO2 being stored and trapped in the minerals, that it does not escape back into the atmosphere and reverse the gains that you would have achieved through the storage.
Okay, so the science on this is pretty solid.
It's very well understood, pretty solid. It's been tried in many parts of the world. We're following from other parts of the world as well, comparing notes with partners from across the world. For instance, in that particular pilot we're doing in Leandra, we're following a technology that's been applied in Iceland, the sequestration in Basalt. So it's very well understood. It's been tried and tested, and we're confident that we'll be able to replicate it here at home.
And the longer-term plan, I mean, what contribution would it make over the longer term? It would do all sorts of things, would allow us a lot of flexibility with our coal-fired power stations, and Kusile and Medupi are both expected to run for another 50 years.
Yes, that's correct. It would allow us time to continuously use the coal reserves that we have. It will also allow us time and buy us time to be able to implement the just transition trajectory in a manner that does not disrupt our energy supply and also does not cause a major disruption in our socio-economic dynamics.
Are you working with government and the private sector on this? How does that partnership go?
Yes, we are a government entity ourselves under the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy. We are working with the private sector. We've brought in a lot of partnerships from the private sector, particularly with the key role players in the coal production industry. They've got a very deep knowledge of the industry and these processes, and they'll be able to assist us in making sure that the CCS technology is adapted to their technologies, and we are able to also attract investment from the private sector as well, because the carbon capture and storage technology comes at quite a lot of cost.
I'm sure. Kondin Kwana, thank you very much indeed. Carbon Capture Utilization and Storage Project Manager at the Council for Geoscience. That conversation brought to you by the Council for Geoscience this morning.
At SFM Radio and at Stephen Grootes on Twitter.
Well, voice notes, of course, coming through this morning and all sorts of conversations. I imagine many of them around former President Jacob Zuma. You know the number 0614 104 107.
Good morning, Stephen. I think the Electoral Court got it all wrong, Stephen. But what stands out for me is for them not to release the reason why did they come to that decision. So that's so disappointing. I mean, that's something else I've never seen such, Stephen. So for me, Electoral Court got it all wrong. Thank you.
All right, as I made the point at the start of the show, I don't think we can blame the Electoral Court for that. They were put in a position in which they had to hand down a ruling. They had to hear the case on the Monday and hand down an order on the Tuesday. So they did say at the beginning this would be a problem. Other voice notes?
We all know the type of man Jacob Zuma is. He is hungry for power, hungry for finances, especially the finances of the state. A man that is implicated in state capture, the enabler of the Guptas, and he wants to go back to Parliament. Hell no. No, no.
I did warn you there'll be strong views. All right. Of course, other voice notes and other calls coming through this morning as well. 20 minutes now after 8 o'clock.
The Science of Life on SAFM.
Well, there's been a lot more research and a lot more indications of the importance of what are called non-communicable diseases. In other words, how the way we live leads to our health. And we're talking about things like smoking, what you eat, how often you actually get exercise, how often you rest, things like that. And there's a renewed call for companies to actually look after their workers a little more and to make it easier for people to look after themselves as well. Dr. Chris van Straten is a global health advisor on clinical governance at the organisation International SOS. Dr. van Straten, good morning.
Good morning, and thanks for inviting me back on the show.
It's amazing to think, and I realise Stats SA released this figure, that deaths due to non-communicable diseases have increased by nearly 60% in the last 20 years. I mean, we're talking about things that we could prevent. I mean, it's a very scary number.
It is a pretty scary number. The numbers itself can make one pretty depressed and feel a bit anxious, but there is good news, and the good news is that we have more insights. We know that eating well, exercising, getting enough sleep, are things that we can change and impact on. And we also see with companies that have implemented robust programs and really followed up on that, you can improve those metrics. So there is good news.
It's interesting to see companies do this. I mean, if you've got a big sporting events, cycling races or marathons and things like that, you'll see company teams running together. Now, let me be clear. I love Zelma Mdu and Stanza, but I really don't want to go running with them because I don't want to go running with anyone because I'm a cyclist. But does that kind of thing work? You get team spirit. I do wonder, though, if you end up with the cycling team and the running team just fighting with each other all the time.
Okay, really interesting example. A couple of things can work. One, we have seen, if you look, there is people who've sugarcoated things and made it look good. But here's a couple of important things. One, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. It's an old business wording that I think holds true for all disciplines. And what about those who can't cycle and what about those who can't run? So those with disabilities or are struggling with, let's say, a high BMI. But I think the teamwork is critically important. I've been to many companies around the world, and you walk into the canteen and it's just sugars and fatty foods and snack bars. And then we've also worked with companies that have gone, hang on, let's make sure there's really good food, nutritious foods in this canteen. Let's get exercising. Let's make sure people can exercise at work or make it easy access close by for the different ranges and abilities of the people in that company.
It's interesting to look at company culture in this. I mean, I've worked for places where I can see years later when I bump into someone, this person worked at the company I worked at, and I can just see that from the way they talk, the way they hold themselves. Doesn't matter where in our society they come from. But just having been through that company for a period of, say, 5 years, I can see this person definitely worked here, and I'll ask them, and sometimes I'm right. I mean, there's something there for a company culture, for a managerial culture, isn't there?
Absolutely. And it's subtle. It can be difficult to influence or project manage and change, but it can be done. And it can significantly impact people's mood, their motivation to come to work, their productivity when they're at work, and how they engage with their families and society at large. So there's more and more data coming through on this, and it's pretty clear. You get a return on investment. You can create strong cultures and a healthy culture.
You talk about assessment, and more people wear watches, or phones will do it too. They count your steps, for example. And I've been fascinated watching my 12-year-old daughter, who has got one of these sort of cheap watches, but she gets obsessed by the number of steps she's done every day, which I find, come on, calm yourself. On the other hand, for the rest of her life, just maybe, she will know how much physical exercise she's done in a week. And that may be a good thing, but there's part of me that thinks it's quite a scary thing, actually.
I think with all these digital tools, like we see with social media, of course, there can be a negative aspect. There can be exposure to misinformation, disinformation. You also don't want to develop a neurosis or obsession with numbers that could do harm. So exercise is critically important. And what's important with the 10,000 steps is not so much the 10,000 steps, but how it relates to you and your health conditions. And are you getting fitter over time or getting unfit over time? In other words, tracking and trending those numbers over a person's lifetime or while they're sick, or trying to achieve a certain benchmark. I think that's where we've seen they can be very powerful in giving people real tangible things, right? I think back before I had my cell phone, before I had my smartwatch, it was difficult. It was difficult sending faxes and documents and keeping track of things. So they are good, they are powerful in the right context.
How much of it is also about patterns? And I've watched my life as I approach early middle age, a bit older than that, I suppose, to be honest. But, when I was younger, when I was at school, I really wasn't interested in exercise. And as I got older, more and more I find that I'm sort of more interested in exercise, which is interesting. And I've noticed among my peers as well, people who weren't very interested in exercise are now much more interested in exercise because you realize it makes you feel better. And once you start, it's much easier to keep going. What I'm trying to get to is I sort of look back now and wish I'd avoided that sort of moment in my teenage years, my 20s, when I wasn't that interested in exercise. And yet it can be very difficult to encourage young people to be active.
Yeah. And again, technology is the blessing and a curse, right? So computer games are brilliant. Ways of learning that one can do digitally is brilliant. But one does need to move. We evolved to move. And in fact, one of my colleagues talks about a sedentary lifestyle, like being the new smoking. It's very clear that the fitter you keep and the more you move, the healthier you'll be physically in a cardiovascular sense, neurologically in terms of brain, cognition, and reducing risk of dementia. But here's the important thing. It's more about that consistent daily movement as opposed to a once-a-week burn in the gym. Really important. And, for example, a consistent daily 3 to 5 kilometer walk or getting close to 10,000 steps, that's where the key is. And so it's setting these reasonable parameters. Not everyone can be the next cycle team or the next Comrades Marathon. It's getting that right balance.
That walk, every day you do that walk, and you can do it until well into your 70s, 80s. That's really the key, isn't it?
Exactly. That's it.
Dr. Chris van Straten, thanks very much indeed. Really do appreciate the time. Global Health Advisor on Clinical Governance at International SOS. No, I'm not going for a 5-kilometer walk today. Thank you. 27 after 8.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Well, Sundown's going to make it a walk in the park tonight.
I hope so. That's what they did last night. They had a win against Cape Town Spurs. 1-0 was that scoreline. And they're continuing their undefeated walk in the DStv Premiership. Now, despite controversies, Sundowns moved to 52 points and maintain a comfortable lead at the top of the table under head coach Rulani Mokwena's impressive record. Spurs are led by Ernst Middendorp. They faced relegation with a dismal win percentage, and they were striving to secure their premiership status in the remaining matches ahead of the season. Now, looking ahead, Sundowns are gearing up to also clinch the CAF Champions League title this year, marking a potential high point in a season already glittering with success. Defender Khuliso Mudau, fresh off a bronze medal with Bafana Bafana at the Africa Cup of Nations, is driving the team's ambitions. And with their sights firmly set on adding a second Champions League trophy to their cabinet, their first since 2016, Sundowns face a formidable barrier in the Tunisian powerhouse Esperance. The two-legged semi-final this month promises high stakes as well as high drama, and Mudau's determination reflects not just personal ambition but a collective resolve within the team.
As a player, sometimes you just need to tell yourself and believe in yourself sometimes, But firstly, what I can say is when I came here, I had problems that obviously I have to compete with those names, But I believed in myself, and I told myself I need to work hard, improve every day when I come to training, and then that's when everything went okay.
Now, cricket, Tasman Brits struck a century, but rain having the final say as the opening ODI between the Proteas women and Sri Lanka washed out at Buffalo Park in East London. Brits cracked 12 fours on her way to her second ODI 100 before she was out for 116 off 128 balls. Her effort leading the Proteas to a 270 for 6, batting first. Now, just under 7 overs were then possible in Sri Lanka's chase, with them reaching 23 for the loss of no wickets when rain arrived, and eventually the match was obviously called off. Now, other cricket news: Sunrisers Hyderabad successfully defended their total of 182 for 9 just to beat the Punjab Kings by 2 runs in the match at the Indian Premier League. And finally, golf: Rory McIlroy will get his 10th attempt to compete the career Grand Slam underway today when the Masters starts at Augusta National. The Northern Irishman plays with the only man ranked higher than him in the world, and that's the 2022 victor Scottie Scheffler and fellow American Xander Schauffele. Now, Spain's defending champion John Rahm is out of the group alongside England's Mats Fitzpatrick, and that's later in the afternoon. 5-time winner Tiger Woods is amongst the late starters going out in the evening. Record 6-time winner Jack Nicklaus, 3-time champion Gary Player, and twice winner Tom Watson will hit the ceremonial opening tee shots, and that's this morning before South Africa's Eric van Rooyen is first to tee off. Now, the Northern Irishman McIlroy has won all the majors apart from the Masters.
I've won from 10 strokes back going into the weekend. There's loads of different ways to do it. I think this golf course gets you to chase things a little more than other golf courses if you make a bogey or if you get yourself out of position, because it always tempts you to do something you think you can do. And, pretty confident in my golf game. I think I can do most things. So, but sometimes you just have to take the conservative route and be a little more disciplined and patient. And
we'll bring you more sport here on SFM around 12:30. I'm Zaika.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. Security at hospitals, that's next. You're with SFM leading the conversation, 8:30.
Good morning. In the headlines, the Electoral Commission has requested that the Electoral Court hand down the reasons that led to the order in which it dismissed the objection made against former President Jacob Zuma. The Powers and Privileges Committee will today receive an update on the complaint laid by the DA against the former National Assembly Speaker, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula. The DA Chief Whip, Siviwe Khwaghobe, wants the committee to investigate Mapisa-Nqakula following the salary increase of the Secretary to Parliament, Xolile George. Residents of Kayamandi in Stellenbosch in the Western Cape, whose homes have been razed by a fire over the weekend, are battling to rebuild. Over 1,000 people have been left homeless after the blaze ripped through the zone O's informal settlement on Saturday. I'll have details on these and other stories at 9.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good, M2 remaining very heavily backed up from Joe Slovo Drive all the way downtown in towards the Crowd interchange. Collision there much earlier this morning, backed everything up, and it hasn't really recovered. Republic Road from Randburg across towards William Mandela on your way to Sandton, very slow. Traffic lights out at Kaya Sand, so Malabongwe Drive, a route under pressure. And we're just looking at some queuing pressure on the N3 going north from Limbo Park up towards Buccleuch. All of a sudden, that's getting busy. Crash in Pretoria now on the N1 between Garsfontein and Rigel. It's on the southbound side, so that's heavy, but there must be a big enough one for northbound traffic to have a look at. So from just after the R21 up through Rigel towards Garsfontein, that's all backed up heading northbound side. Spaghetti Junction in Durban really busy this morning. The N2 from Inanda Road through towards 4 level, and then the N2 North and the N3 inbound. Seems to be a problem between Spaghetti Junction and Sherwood. And just a note, if you drive that N2 coming southbound on Monday and Tuesday, we saw just delays all day between sort of this time and 4 p.m, 3:30, 4 p.m. In the afternoon. The M13 coming from Pinetown stays heavy towards the N3 at Paradise Valley. And Cape Town, a breakdown. N2 inbound at Hospital Bend. The left lane is closed, keeping traffic under pressure from as far back as Langa. The M5 north to get into that N2, quite heavy. And still a lot of traffic on the N3 this morning from Constantia up through Bishop's Court on your way towards the UCT exit. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Mediated conversation on SAFM.
26 minutes now to 9 the time for your mediated conversation this morning. Yesterday you heard a conversation with the trade union Nahawu in Mpumalanga about a group of men who were barging their way into the Temba Hospital near White River and assaulting or attacking nurses and doctors. Nahawu says the men want tenders from the hospital and that they've disrupted the treatment of patients. Over the years we've heard so many cases about the problems with security in our hospitals. From time to time, the victim of an assault by a gang will be brought to a hospital, and then members of that gang will come to the hospital because they actually want to finish killing the victim. We've seen situations where patients have been robbed. You can imagine how difficult it can actually be to keep a hospital safe. The whole point is that people should gain access to an institution easily so they can get the treatment they need. So then why is this such a big problem? What can be done to make sure our hospitals are safe? First, this morning you'll hear from Welcome Mnisi, the Mpumalanga Provincial Secretary for the Union Nahawu, the conversation we had with him yesterday. Then the situation for nurses. We'll hear from the Nursing Union Denosa, Sibungasani Slihlazo is their person, their communications manager. Then Jack Bloom is the DA Shadow Health MEC in Gauteng. We'll ask him about the situation in that province. And finally, to respond to all of that, the head of security for the National Health Department is Rudzani Mpilo. We'll start then with yesterday's conversation. Welcome Mnisi is the Mpumalanga Provincial Secretary for Nahawu. I asked him what was happening at the Temba Hospital.
Let us just mention that this incident that has happened in Temba Hospital is not for the first time that has been happening in the hospital and other institutions within Mpumalanga province. We're talking about healthcare facilities. The only difference in Temba Hospital is that there are local business people who are thugs who have then resorted to target the institution because they demand for business opportunities such as the tenders, as you are indicating. This has happened in front of us, my brother, because you will remember that in each and every institution, we are having structures of the union. We are having leaders. And these leaders of the union have themselves been attacked by these thugs who are known by hospital management who are known by community members, people who will just drive in the hospital with vehicles, loaded at the back of vehicles, and then terrorize workers, demanding business opportunities, demanding to see the products that are delivered, that are given to patients in the hospital, to see whether it is coming from local and so on. This is the kind of situation that we are currently faced with in Gapogweni, in Temba Hospital. Yes, indeed, it has happened in front of us when we were watching. It's not only the professional employees who have been attacked, including all levels of workers, all categories have been attacked by this thugs.
And by attacked, I mean, people actually being assaulted.
Yes, indeed. People have been assaulted. I mean, what do you call it when armed people carrying guns, they will just walk into the hospital, walk into the offices and demand to be given opportunities, business opportunities, and then go around the hospital terrorizing people. We're talking about an employee that has been assaulted there with a stethoscope that is used to assess patients within the hospital. That doctor was attacked in the same hospital. Other workers were held at hostage by these armed people who have not covered their faces. So it means that they can do as they wish in that particular institution. Yes, there are a number of cases where that has happened in Temba Hospital.
Welcome. Where are the police? I mean, shouldn't the police be dealing with this?
It's a good question, my brother. When this thing first happened last year, let me just briefly, a few seconds. Last year, we were attending a meeting with management resolving issues that affect members in Temba Hospital and the community. During the evening, around 9:30, a group of people walked in. They want to tell us that our meeting is prolonged now. They are delayed. They want to be paid for the services that they've rendered. We are wasting time here. They walked in, and we said to the department, go and open a case. That has never happened. That was 2023. And this year, there has been a number of incidents where we've been calling the department. The past 3 weeks, this has been happening for quite a lot. And we said to the department, this thing is not good at all. Go and open a case. There's a police station almost less than a kilometer from that hospital. The department has failed to do that. And what has happened now, it just confirms on what Nehao has been raising. The department has failed to protect workers. And safety and security is one of the 6 key priorities within the Department of Health. Yes, they have failed to do that. They waited until such incidents happened. And some of these incidents happened in front of them. When this attack happened last week, management was in the institution and Nehao had said, we are not safe because of 1, 2, and 3. Please come up with a risk assessment plan that's going to protect the workers. Unfortunately, that did not happen.
Sure. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, someone's going to get killed if this goes on.
Workers are going to be killed, my brother. Remember the incident in Mpumalanga I've highlighted. Currently, as we speak, people are doing as it pleases. Currently now, seated here, 15 state vehicles in Gangala region around Witbank have been stolen without being recovered. Only 3 have been recovered. In Evander Hospital in Herzeland, a worker is still missing with a vehicle of state. Since last year, that worker is missing. You can just imagine the trauma suffered by the children of that worker, a member of Nehao, by the families, by the workers in that particular institution. So this incident that has happened in Temba Hospital is a continuation of what we've been raising. That's why Nehao has said, in-source security services, Mpumalanga Provincial Department. And there's been a number of promises where we've been promised that was going to happen, so that we're in control over the healthcare security services. But we have not been listened. We have said all institutions in Mpumalanga province must be safeguarded by employees that belongs to provincial government as a result of the insourcing. We were told that this is going to happen, and it has not happened. So this is the result of what is happening. It's workers in other government institutions, they are also suffering the same problem that we are experiencing currently.
Welcome, Nisi there, the Mpumalanga Provincial Secretary for Nehao, explaining the situation in the Temba Hospital in Mpumalanga. 19 minutes to 9. The time we mediate a conversation here on SFM this morning about hospital security. Sabongaseni Delachlazo is the communications manager for the nursing union Denosa. Sabongaseni, good morning, and I apologize for the way I mispronounced your name earlier.
Good morning, Stephen, and good morning to the listeners. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Is this problem happening at other hospitals in other provinces? Are your members reporting similar things where there are issues with security in hospitals?
Oh, yes, Stephen. Well, in fact, I think if you remember, we always made this noise. This is quite a nationwide problem. In fact, it's in some instances, it's worse than that. I mean, we've had nurses who are killed inside facilities. You've had nurses who've been attacked in the wee hours of the night. The most risk tends to be mostly in clinics. In clinics, how our clinics are situated, Stephen, particularly over the weekends, you find that a clinic is in a community, of course, and you find that not far from the clinic are taverns or shebeens which sell alcohol until the very early morning, over the weekend, it's quite chaotic. These are, of course, customers in taverns. They tend to fight and injure each other. Sometimes they would stab each other, and they would even shoot each other. And now, if my friend has been shot and we're a group of guys would bulge into a clinic and will demand that our friend be taken care of ahead of everybody who's there in a facility, and the chaos that gets created result is untold, Stephen. Unfortunately, this is an ongoing phenomenon. We've always reported it. We still do not understand, in spite of all the risks that we've always raised in the meetings about the need to beef up security in healthcare facilities. I do not think the Department of Health should be happy with the private security that is providing security in our healthcare facilities. As to why not sourcing as we always demand, we do not. And are they really getting value for money? We do not think so. If you insource security in our healthcare facilities, we believe as unions, you may end up hiring 10 personnel instead of 6, because private service provision, of course, they would give you security, but also they must make profit. They're not likely to just give you service and not take some money for profit. Hence, we believe more security could be added if you insource it, but the department is not insourcing it. Unfortunately, healthcare personnel tends to be the victims. And Stephen, nurses provide essential healthcare services, and they provide that for a reason. Healthcare facilities are essential service centers, and that is for a reason. And you can't have nurses who are not able to provide services simply because of the issue of their safety, and you can't give that service if their safety is not secured.
So I appreciate what you say about insourcing, and I'll put that to the department in a few moments. But is there also not a structural problem with hospitals? And this is, I think, outside the control of the department, which is that hospitals, by their nature, need to be open. And so you've got structures that are designed to be open in the center of their communities. I mean, they're often not, but they should be. And isn't that really the structural problem?
Well, it is. Obviously, it's but of course, when you come up with your systems as a hospital on how on assessing the risks, such must also be taken into account. And you can't have 2 securities in a clinic in a community that have got 10 taverns. That obviously should tell you as a facility that there are more risks of security in your facility. Your staff may be at risk, and you feel risk assessment must be done, and it must be responsive to the potential danger the facility may be faced with. And we don't think it is happening as it should.
Sibongiseni Delahlazo, thanks very much indeed. Communications Manager for the Nursing Union Denosa. Just gone 9:15 with SFM. Your mediated conversation around hospital security continues. Jack Blum is the Shadow Health MEC for the DA in Gauteng. Jack, good morning.
Good morning. It's good to be with you.
How would you rate the quality of the security at hospitals in Gauteng?
It's poor, Stephen, and we're getting very poor value for money. The Gauteng Health Department spends about 800 million rand a year on private security companies, but I think there's a lot of corruption in the choice of these security companies. They don't do the job that they're meant to do. And let's just take one example. Schakenkreke, Johannesburg Hospital, they spend over 30 million rand a year on hospital security there, and yet there's still incidents like copper pipes being being stolen, cables being stolen, and that sort of thing, and cars of staff people being stolen. I mean, these are major things for the people and the patients that are there, and yet you're spending 30 million rand a year on that, and they've got security cameras all over the hospital, but the security cameras don't work. So I really think we could do a lot better with the available budget.
Would insourcing the security guards make a difference?
Well, in fact, the Gauteng Health Department has done an exercise, and they've said that insourcing would be too expensive. But in fact, I think the real issue is that we get private security companies that are not value for money. They shouldn't have got the job in the first place. They're not efficient, and they're raking it in. I don't think that they're paying their security guards as much as they could, or hiring as many as they could, because they're in it for themselves, and that's because of the nature of the tender system and corruption, I have to say. You know, for about 8 years now, the Gauteng Health Department has rolled over security contracts month by month. They should have expired about 6 years ago, and that's completely irregular. And you have to ask, why are they continue to give security contracts to the same companies who provide a poor service?
The crimes that you talk about in Gauteng hospitals, do they involve just theft, or are there acts of violence as well, like we've seen in Mpumalanga?
Well, a major problem in Gauteng hospitals is mental health patients, because there aren't sufficient facilities for them. So you find a lot of the reported incidents is because they're not in a secure facility, and that staff get attacked and other patients get attacked. You had one patient who was killed at Jabulani Hospital, I think it was about 2 years ago, by mental health patients. So, I mean, there's infrastructure problems as well, because we don't have secure facilities for mental health patients in particular, but really we do need to beef up security at our hospitals, particularly casualty departments. You know, if you find that people come in, injured people come in, they're drunk, or you might get gangsters, and who knows what you get at a casualty department, and doctors and nurses are defenseless there. What are they supposed to do when they get threatened? And that's exactly what happens. So I think there's certainly enough budget in Gauteng to provide a decent security service at our hospitals and clinics, provided we choose the right companies, they have good management, and they do their jobs.
Jack Blum, thank you very much indeed. The Shadow Health MEC for the Democratic Alliance in Gauteng. Well, in a moment, to respond from the National Health Department, the Head of Security in the National Health Department, Rudzani Mpilo. That's next year with SAFM, 12 minutes to 9.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning. Crash on the N1 South in Pretoria that we've been telling you about. It's happened between Garsfontein and Rigel. There's a big queue coming south from Atterbury roadside. In fact, that traffic on the N1 South pushing back, in fact, towards Linwood Road. So that's heavy. N1 South, and a big enough crash to be backing you up on the northbound side, moving up through Rigel towards Garsfontein as well. N3, Limbro Park through to Buccleuch stays heavy. Here's some good news. The M2 clear, now running through central Joburg. That earlier crash going into the Crown, thing of the park. All out of the way. If you're leaving Germiston, factor in some queue time on the M2. You're going to be asked to sit in traffic as you come on at Refinery Road down towards the Hilton AC interchange. Important news just reaching us from Durban. The N3 blast at Peacevale today has been postponed until Friday. So it'll be the same time, 2:30 until 3 p.m. But it won't happen today. The N3 will stay open through Peacevale. It'll be Friday afternoon, that closure. So we've got a couple more days to remind you about that. Durban traffic easing up. The only exceptions there, really, the N2 southbound from Inanda Road, very heavy into 4 level down to Spaghetti Junction. Monday and Tuesday, we saw just delays all day. It's either an additional lane closure in the roadworks before Spaghetti, or it's a crash, or it's just one breakdown after the other. So if you come down that N2 south in that sort of traditional off-peak part of the day, just factor in some queues. Cape Town, the main road at Clovelly stays heavily backed up between Muizenberg and Fischhoek. There's some real delays there. M3 still very heavy as well, queuing up from Bishop's Court, to Bishop's Court from Constantia, and then again through towards the UCT exit. And the breakdown at Hospital Bend means the N2 inbound staying busy from Langa. Behind that, the M5 north queuing up to squeeze into that N2 queue. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Join us on Afternoon Express, Tuesday at 6 p.m. on S3 as we ask what makes a good friend with therapist Kim Abrahams. Social worker Tobega Mbogazi shares how to move on from toxic friendships. And gents, get your buddies and make a delicious bacon and wors pasta. That's Afternoon Express, Tuesday at 6 p.m. Repeat Sundays at 8:30 a.m. only on S3.
In the heart of South Africa's coal-rich province in Mpumalanga, the Council for Geoscience pioneers the fight against climate change with the implementation of carbon capture, utilization and storage project. The CCUS technology captures carbon emissions at their source and securely stores them underground at carefully selected geological formations. This endeavour not only mitigates CO2 emissions but also supports vital coal-dependent industries for South Africa's development. Near Leandra, the CGS has identified a site that will pilot this project as one of the developmental imperatives towards achieving a low-carbon economy.
Mediated conversation on SAFM.
Continuing a mediated conversation this morning around security at our hospitals. Rudzani Mpilo is the head of security in the National Health Department. Rudzani, good morning.
Good morning to you and to the fellow panelists and to the listeners at large.
When it comes to hospitals are run in our system by the provinces. What powers do you have to protect hospitals? Is it left entirely to the provinces? Is it their responsibility?
Yeah, perhaps before I could directly answer your question, we are aware of the security challenges that we're confronted with as a sector, and not only in the public health space, also in the private health, such problems do exist. You see, the crimes that we're confronted with as health is a reflection of the societal problems. It is not like these crimes are happening in public health facilities. It's a true reflection of the societal problems that are informed by historical legacies, unemployment, poverty, just to mention the few. And second to that, it is also attributed to the slow growth of the economy. The population is growing more than the economy, so that then creates the fertile ground for crimes to happen. And as health, we are the receiving end. So the contributors of, the contributing factors of crime are outside the health system. We are on the receiving end. However, we are working in provinces. We are working with provinces. And in fact, the National Health Council, which is the highest decision-making structure in the health system, chaired by the Minister and all MSs, has taken security as one of the non-negotiables to indicate that we take security seriously. And in that regard, the Minister has established a security committee, ministerial committee, not led by us, but also by South African police services. You are aware that crime is the mandate of SAPS, and at the same time, we have the responsibility as the department to create a safe and secure working environment. And to that end, we have put some measures in place to respond to the crimes that are happening.
So Rudzani, I'm sorry to interrupt you, and we understand all of that, and I understand why that's important. But I think the real question is, what are you actually doing? So if we could get to the measures, what are you actually doing to make our hospitals safe?
Okay, we have through the very same structure that I'm referring to, and provinces are represented by all senior managers responsible for security. We are receiving intelligence reports to inform us on the best, security measures that we should put. Because if we do not approach in that way, we may end up putting measures that are not effective. So through that structure, we are getting intelligence briefing from that priority committee from NetJoint. We have also conducted security assessment across the country. We are aware of the status of security and what should be done per facility in this country. We are also, and in fact, we have entered into memorandum of understanding with SAPS for them to also assist us by conducting regular patrols to hotspot facilities in the country, escorting of EMS practitioners, deploying of police reservists at the hotspot facilities, and we're working with provinces to ensure that reserve police are deployed, particularly during the festive season, We are also working with SAPS to ensure that all reported cases within the public health facilities are investigated speedily. On our side, as a department, we have taken it in ourselves to ensure that we improve the security infrastructure in our public health facilities. The outcome of the assessment suggested that we need to really improve on the security infrastructure in the country, and with specific to the Temba Hospital, as my colleague was saying, we have installed a good system. I think it is a year, if not 2 years ago. We have CCTV camera system, the alarm system, the boom gate, and this is as a result of the assessment that we have done in consultation.
Okay, Rudzani, again, I'm sorry to interrupt you. So I appreciate the fact that you've added to the measures at the Temba Hospital in Mpumalanga, but this group of men went and did this last week. So when you hear of a case like this, where a group of people are doing this, and will probably do it again, are you able to send a team to go and protect workers? Does anyone do anything to track down this group of men? Are the CCTV cameras working so that they can be identified?
Yeah, we do have. In fact, they came, I think it was on the 4th. They met with the hospital board and they assaulted some of the members of the hospital board. And on that very case, we have opened the case with South African Police Services. They came again, I think it was, in fact, they came on the 2nd and they came again on the 4th. With I think there were between 40 to 50, and they overpowered security, unfortunately. And indeed, police are investigating this case. We have footages of those that came and assault and forcefully gain entry to the hospital because they overpowered our security. I mean, the force was proportionally higher than the force we have on the ground, and they were armed as well. So we've since opened the case. And second to that, we have also deployed a reaction force to that very hospital to ensure that the safety of our employees and patients is guaranteed.
Okay, so what do you do? I mean, okay, I realize it's a large group of people, and I understand and I have sympathy for that. But is anyone actually investigating this group of people to go and arrest them?
Yes, I don't want to talk on behalf of SAPS, but we have given the footages, we have given all the evidence we have in our disposal to ensure that this case is properly investigated and the added work, and surely in due course we'll be able to update the public on the progress made in that regard. So the investigation is continuing as I'm speaking.
Okay. The issue of insourcing guards, and I mean unions, Rudzani, sort of ideologically want guards to be insourced, and that's their position, and they're consistent about it. But is there any way of knowing if insourced guards would provide a better service? We've heard that it might actually be more expensive to do it like that.
We have conducted the study in partnership with academics, unions in particular. As we see, we don't have any scientific evidence that suggests that insourcing of security will resolve the safety and security problems that we're confronted with. The best model is when you combine both in-house and outsourcing, supported by the security system. So the evidence we have in our disposal suggests that insourcing alone will not entirely resolve the safety and security problems that we are confronted with. We are living in a technological space now. We need to improve infrastructure. We need in-house to manage the private security. We need private security to bring in the expertise. So you will need the combination of all those to provide a relatively safe and secure working environment in our public health space.
Rudzani, thank you very much indeed. I know you do a difficult job. Rudzani Mpilo is the Head of Security for the National Health Department. My thanks also to Jack Bloom, the DA Gauteng Shadow Health MEC, Sabongaseni de la Glazo, the Communications Manager for the Nursing Union Nahawu, and starting us off today, that clip from Welcome Mnisi, the Mpumalanga Provincial Secretary for Nahawu. Well, that is all we know and all we have time for, I'm afraid, today. I'm sure there'll be more conversations with Kathy around former President Zuma. Well, let me just say I'll be surprised for a second time this week if they would. We'll be back with you tomorrow from Dustanza, Zelma, myself, Melissa, myself. We're all off for a 5-kilometre walk. Look after yourself. You're with SAFM, leading the conversation, 9 o'clock.
In our top stories, IEC's reaction on electoral court's ruling and feedback regarding Secretary to Parliament salary increase. Good morning. We start with election news. The Electoral Commission, the IEC, has requested that the Electoral Court hand down the reasons that led to the order in which it dismissed the objection made against the former President Jacob Zuma. The order was made yesterday by the Specialist Court. The Umkhonto weSizwe Party launched an appeal against the decision of the IEC to uphold the objection against Zuma that it would see his disqualification based on a section in the Constitution that bars candidates who have received a 12-month or more prison sentence without the option of a fine within the last 5 years to stand for office. The appeal was successful, however, no reasons have yet been given by the court. The Powers and Privileges Committee will today receive an update on the complaint laid by the DA against former National Assembly Speaker Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula. The DA Chief Whip Siviwe Gwagube wants the committee to investigate Mapisa-Nqakula following the salary increase of the Secretary to Parliament Xolile George. George's salary was increased from 2.2 million to 4.4 million rand shortly after being appointed to the position. Abongwe Kobokana reports.
Parliament had revealed following media reports that George's salary was increased by up to 70%. Gwagube had then registered a complaint for Mapisa-Nqakula to be investigated. She wrote to the acting speaker, Lechisa Tsinoli, when he was the deputy speaker, requesting the Powers and Privileges Committee to investigate the matter. Earlier, Gwagube indicated that she wants the matter to be finalized before the upcoming general elections.
The SACP says defending the gains of freedom its late General Secretary Chris Hani fought for will be a fitting tribute as the country marks the 31st commemoration of his death. Hani was killed by a Polish immigrant, Janusz Walusz, on this day in 1993. The party and its alliance partners, the ANC, COSATU and SANCU, will lay wreaths at Hani's grave later this morning. The event, organised by the Ekurhuleni municipality, will also be addressed by government officials. The SACP spokesperson Dr. Alex Mashilo says inasmuch as they celebrate the achievements of the democratic government, they acknowledge a lot still needs to be done.
There are certain things that Chris Hani wanted to see. In defining socialism in simple terms, he said it is about housing for the people, health for the people, education for the people. We all know that millions of our people have benefited from homes built and allocated to them for free by the state. In 1994, we had approximately 8.9 million people who were employed, and in 2023, we had 16.7 million people who were employed. That is a huge increase. These are the things we will be reflecting upon. We have to defend our democratic gains. This is how we want to remember Chris Hani.
The High Court in Polokwane in Limpopo is today expected to conclude judgment in the murder trial of 5 men accused of killing Collins Shabane Mayor Moses Maluleke. Judge Violet Simenya could not conclude reading her judgment yesterday. The accused Shumane Nemadzodzi, Isaac Mudau, Wiseman Balwe, Funzo Ledzibe and Chiano Munyai were tried for killing Maluleke at his home at Shukundu village outside Malamulele in July of 2022. Michael Makungo reports.
Judge Simenya's judgment started by detailing all the evidence that has been brought during the trial. The evidence includes documents that were accepted into evidence, such as a photo album of the crime scene, the post-mortem report, and Nemathod's police statement. Judge Simenya is expected to conclude her judgment today.
Residents of Kayamandi and Stellenbosch in the Western Cape, whose homes have been razed by a fire over the weekend, are battling to rebuild. Over 1,000 people have been left homeless after the blaze ripped through the informal settlement on Saturday. Over 300 structures have been gutted. Weather conditions in Cape Town, Winelands and Helderberg region have stabilized following gale force winds and rain over the weekend. And finally, China's video games giant NetEase says popular games such as World of Warcraft will be back in the country. Last year, NetEase and the game's publisher Activation Blizzard ended their 14-year partnership due to disagreement over intellectual property control. The breakup sparked outcry with millions of Chinese netizens complaining they would lose access to their favorite games. Recapping the top story, the Electoral Commission, the IEC, has requested that the Electoral Court hand down the reasons that led to the order in which it dismissed the objection made against former President Jacob Zuma. For SAFM News, I am Anne Musa.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide.
Come closer. Over here. Man, oh man, do I have something to tell you. Huh? You know what would happen if you weren't here? No SABC Sport, no Skim Sam, no Uzalo, no Deal or No Deal, no Too Hot to Be Single, no family meetings, no radio, no nothing. Just dololo, silence. But you, my friend, you make it happen because you pay your home and business TV license. Now we can Deal or No Deal Celebrity, Mobango, Hectic 99 and Footspooter. So please keep on keeping on and do the right thing so we can make new memories and tell stories for the now generation. SABC TV licenses. Pay yours, make a difference.
The cost of living crisis is real. Here's what one OUTsurance client did about it.
I'm Amy. I'm 26 from Kenilworth. When I got my 2022 Ford EcoSport, the immediate thought was to phone OUTsurance, and I pay only 819 Rand per month. No insurers were able to beat or match the premium that I'm currently paying.
Want a car insurance premium that will blow your mind? SMS out to 30754 now for a quote and to find out about included benefits like panic assistance that sends the nearest medical or armed response unit to you wherever you may be 24/7. Here's Yusuf.
45 years old from Tygeral, Western Cape. I pay 700 Rand for my Polo 1.6 2021 model. If you haven't called OUTsurance yet, definitely get in touch.
Give it a go. SMS out to 30754 now. That's out to 30754. OUTsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's, C's, and limits apply. Premiums are risk profile dependent and reviewed annually. Client comments do not constitute financial advice.
The boys of Steve Barker resist to leave the pitch without a ticket to the semis. But there's a big problem. Kevin Hunt's boys say the last dance of happiness belongs to them. This is the Nedbank Cup quarterfinal battle. Stellies versus Matsatsansa Pitori on Saturday, 13 April at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC 1 and SABC radio stations. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The Talking Point with Kathy Motlatlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.